The whistle of the 10 o'clock train was a thin scream against the vast, indifferent blue of the sky. When Eliza Hart stepped onto the sun-warped lumber of the platform, the heat hit her like a physical blow. It was the 1880s, and this was Dry Mesa, Arizona territory, a place that existed only because a railroad needed a stop. The town was a line of false-fronted buildings, choking on the red dust kicked up by the wind. It was a place of brutal contrasts, wedged between the coming iron of the railroad and the ancient, silent canyons of the Navajo people. To her left, the noise, the clang, clang, clang of steel on steel, where laborers, their backs dark with sweat, drove spikes into raw ties. The air smelled of creosote, hot metal, and human effort. To her right, the valley, a vast expanse of red rock, mesas, and silence. Stretching toward the New Mexico line, water was the only currency that mattered here. The town pump was guarded. The troughs for the horses were shallow. This scarcity bred a specific kind of population. Miners covered in alkali dust from the silver claims, lean-hipped cowboys pushing skeletal cattle toward the railhead, and sharp-eyed merchants weighing every transaction. Eliza Hart was 22 years old, and she felt older than the town. She had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. Her inheritance was not in a bank. It was packed in 3 heavy wooden crates, glass plates, brass lenses, silver nitrate, and a bulky camera that required a tripod as sturdy as a surveyor's. Her father had been a journalist, a man who documented the Civil War with ink and paper. And he had died chasing a story about land rights in Colorado. His last letter to her, which she kept folded in her journal, served as her compass. Eliza, he had written, they are printing dime novel lies about the West. They are dressing it up. Do not dress it up. Write the rest of the story. The part they are leaving out, write it with truth. She had chosen a different medium. Her camera did not editorialize. It simply saw. She was here to assemble a portfolio for a Santa Fe newspaper, a series she called Man-Land Railroad. She intended to capture the raw, unvarnished moment of impact. Her gaze locked on the Grand Hotel and Saloon, the only 2-story building, its balcony offering a commanding view of both the track and the valley entrance. A man stood there, separate from the dust. Bartholomew Pike. He wore a black wool suit, a statement of defiance against the climate. He was the railroad contractor, and she had heard the owner of the silver mines that bled the hills dry. He was a man who looked clean in a dirty world. Beside him, leaning against the balcony rail, was Marshal Kincaid. The lawman's badge was a small, bright star, but his eyes were dull. He was watching the laborers, his hand resting on his pistol. Pike, however, was not looking at the town he was building. He was looking east, toward the valley, toward the red lands he did not own. He wanted something out there. Eliza knew that look. It was the look of a man measuring, and Pike was measuring the valley for its coffin. She lifted her smaller, handheld camera, a scout for the larger one. But Kincaid spotted the movement. He did not smile. He just watched her. Eliza lowered the camera. The truth would have to wait for a better angle. 20 miles east, where the wind spoke in whistles through the hoodoos, Ashki Nez moved without sound. He was a man of perhaps 28 years, with a face that looked carved from the same red rock he walked upon. He was a warrior of the Dine, the people, and a tracker. Today, he was tracking a ghost. The creek bed was a dry, cracked artery. It should not be. The snows on the high mesas had been decent. There should be at least a trickle. He led 3 youths from his clan, boys on the cusp of manhood, teaching them to read the earth. But this lesson was not about deer or antelope. It was about the white man. Here, Ashki said, his voice low. He pointed. This rock is wet on the bottom side, but the sand is dry. It was moved this morning. One of the boys, younger than the others, frowned. Who would move rocks? Someone hiding his path. Ashki said, He lived between two worlds, the duty to his clan and the memory of a trauma that still lived in his skin. When he was a boy, during the long walk, the forced removal of his people. A government soldier had struck him from his horse with a saber. The scar ran from his left shoulder blade to his right hip, a permanent white map of conquest. It ached when the air was this dry. It reminded him that peace was never a guarantee. It was just a pause between thefts. They found the reason for the dry creek just before noon. Tucked into a narrow cut, hidden by scrub pine, was a new dam. It was not a grand structure, but it was lethally efficient. Railroad ties and packed earth, angled to catch the modest flow from the high country and divert it. A new metal pipe, half buried, pointed west, toward Pike's silver mines. Ashki touched the raw, sawn wood. He felt the faint vibration of the water moving inside the pipe. This was it, the lifeblood of his people, siphoned away in secret to wash rocks for a metal they did not need. He looked at the faces of the boys. He saw their confusion turning to anger. He held up a hand. "You will not speak of this. You will only watch. Remember this shape. This is the new face of war. It is not a blue coat. It is a shovel." He needed proof. He needed a way to fight this that did not involve the rifle he carried. But for now, he had only the truth. And the truth was that his people's corn would wither, and their sheep would die. Also, Bartholomew Pike could get richer. Eliza needed a different perspective. She rode her mule, Bess, out of the noise of dry mesa toward Bitter Spring, a place the hotel clerk had mentioned as the last decent water. She found it nestled in a cove of sandstone. It was not a gushing oasis, but a slow, persistent seep that gathered in rocky basins, a small herd of wild horses, their coats matted and their ribs stark, were drinking, their ears twitching. This, Eliza thought, this was the shot, life on the edge. She began the laborious process of setting up her large format camera. She planted the tripod, bolted the heavy camera body, attached the brass lens. She pulled the black cloth over her head, shutting out the world in the upside-down, ethereal image on the ground glass. The horses were silver ghosts. She focused, the image sharpening. It was perfect. She slid the prepared glass plate into the camera back. She was ready. "Do not," the voice was deep, soft, and directly behind her. Eliza's heart leaped into her throat. She ripped the cloth from her head and spun around. He stood not 10 feet away. Ashki Nez. He had approached over bare rock and sand, and he had made no sound. He was tall, his black hair tied back with a simple leather thong. He was armed with a rifle and a knife, but his most unnerving weapon was his stillness. He was watching her, not the camera. "I am sorry," she stammered, stepping away from the tripod. "I did not hear you." "You were not listening," he said. His English was precise, learned, but not his own. "This is a sacred place. You will not point your box here." Ashki had seen her from the ridge. He had watched her ride in, watched her set up the strange, three-legged idol. He had seen these picture takers before. They came. They stole images to show people in the East, and they left nothing but disruption. This spring was where his grandmother came to pray for rain. "I am only photographing the horses," Eliza said, gesturing to the herd. "It is part of my work, to show life in the West." "The horses are welcome," Ashki said. "They respect the water. Your box does not." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over the camera. "It takes things that are not for sale." Eliza looked at him. This was not the savage of the dime novels. This was a man defending his church. She thought of her father's words. "Write the truth." "I did not know," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I am not photographing any people. I am not documenting a ceremony." "The land is the ceremony," he said, his gaze unwavering. "The water is the ceremony. You see a picture. I see the heart of my people. You will take it down." There was no room for argument in his voice. She could refuse. He was one man. She was a white woman. And even in dry Mesa, that held a certain fragile power. But Kincaid would not ride out here to defend her. And looking at this man, she knew she was in the wrong. Slowly, deliberately, she began to unlatch the camera body from the tripod. It was a gesture of surrender. As she bent to fold the tripod legs, her boot heel struck a small object in the dust. She knelt. Half buried in the sand was a string of turquoise beads, the color of a perfect morning sky. It was broken, perhaps snagged on the brush. She gathered the bright stones. She stood and held them out to him, palm up. "You drop this. I think it is yours." Ashki stopped. He looked at the turquoise in her hand. It was a small, personal prayer string his grandmother had made for him. He had not even felt it break. He looked at her hand, stained with photochemicals, and then at her face. Her eyes were not angry. They were clear and steady. She was not afraid, just present. He reached out and, with surprising gentleness, took the beads from her palm. His calloused fingers grazed her skin. "Guy," he said, "a thank you." He studied her, this small, stubborn woman with the truth box. She was not like the others. She had listened. "I am Eliza Hart," she said. "I am Ashki Nez." He nodded, a gesture of acknowledgement. He should tell her to run, to take her mule and her boxes and go back east. But he looked at her again. She had the same look in her eyes as the badger he had seen defending its den. She would not run. "You are in a dangerous place, Eliza Hart," he said, his voice softer now. "I am beginning to understand that." "Bartholomew Pike," he said, using the name like a curse. "He is diverting the water from the valley. He thinks we will not notice." "The dam," Eliza said, the pieces clicking into place. "The one near the silver mines." Ashki's eyes narrowed. "You know of this." "I only know what I see. I see a town with no water, and a man who owns a mine that needs a great deal of it." He looked at her. A long, calculating look. This woman saw things. Perhaps her box was not a thief. Perhaps it was a weapon. "He will not stop at the water." Ashki said, "He wants the valley. The railroad needs a depot. Our springs are better than the town pump." "He has the marshal," Eliza said. "He has guns," Ashki countered. "We have the land. It is not an even fight." He turned to leave. "Wait," she called out. He paused, looking back. "Your people," Eliza said. "The land. If I could show the truth of what is happening, my photographs, they could go to Santa Fe. They could show the truth." Ashki looked at the sky, then back at her. "The truth is a slow horse in a fast race. Eliza Hart, be careful your truth does not get you killed." He turned, and this time he did not stop. He flowed into the landscape, and in moments he was gone, leaving only the heat, the thirsty horses, and the heavy weight of a secret shared. Eliza packed her camera. The undeveloped plate of the horses still inside. Her story had just found its focus. The air in Dry Mesa was a loaded gun. Eliza Hart had spent the day processing the encounter at Bitter Spring. The man. Ashki Nez had not left her thoughts. He was right. The water was the story. The rest was just window dressing. She had returned to her small rented room behind the general store, a space that stank of the chemicals she used, and resolved to follow the pipeline. Twilight had thickened to a deep, bruised purple. She was not done working. Her Man-Land Railroad series needed a counterpoint to the day's labor. She wanted the railroad at rest. She hauled her smaller camera and tripod toward the rail yard, seeking a high point on a stack of undelivered freight. She was framing a shot of the new raw-timbered company warehouse, its shape stark against the last light. The air was still. The only sounds were the tinny piano from the saloon and the distant yip of a coyote. Then she saw them. 2 men. They moved from the deep shadows near the loading dock. They were not laborers. They wore the dark coats and flat-brimmed hats favored by the men who walked too close to Bartholomew Pike. They glanced around, their movements furtive. They were carrying a small, heavy crate. One man knelt by the warehouse foundation, near a stack of supply barrels. The other struck a match. The tiny orange flare illuminated his companion's hands, and the object he was fiddling with. It was a small, brass-cased device with a dial, a timer. Eliza's blood went cold. This was not work. This was a secret. Her photographer's instincts took over. She was already set up. The light was almost gone, but it might be enough. She uncapped the lens. She needed 30 seconds. She counted in her head, her breath frozen in her chest. 1, 2, 3. The men finished. They looked around once more, then stood. They did not run. They walked, calm and purposeful, melting back into the darkness. 28, 29, 30. She capped the lens. She scrambled down, her heart hammering against her ribs. She packed the plate holder, her hands fumbling with the brass clips. She had it. She did not know what it was, but she knew it was dangerous. Eliza hurried back to her room, bolting the flimsy door. She was halfway through mixing her developer when the explosion hit. It was not a sharp crack, but a low, heavy whoomph that rattled the glass jars on her shelf. The floorboards jumped. Shouts erupted in the street. The town fire bell began to clang, a panicked, desperate rhythm. She ran to her window and looked out. The sky above the rail yard was a terrible, pulsing orange. The company warehouse was burning. By the time she reached the street, the town was pouring from the saloon and the boarding houses. The warehouse was an inferno. Men formed a useless bucket brigade. Bartholomew Pike was already there, his arms spread, his face a mask of civic outrage. "Sabotage!" he bellowed, his voice carrying over the crackle of the flames. "It is the Navajo. They did this." Marshal Kincaid stood beside him, his badge reflecting the fire. "He is right. They have been threatening the railroad. They have been threatening our water." Pike pointed not at the fire, but toward the dark valley. "This is an act of war. They mean to drive us out. They are savages, and they have proven it tonight." Eliza stood frozen in the crowd, the cold realization washing over her. They were lying. They had done this themselves. They had created their own excuse. This was not about a warehouse. This was about the land Ashki Nez had sworn to protect. She turned and ran back to her room. She had to develop the plate. Her hands shook so badly she spilled the collodion. "Steady," she whispered to herself. "Steady." She locked the door. She lit her red safe light. She poured the chemicals. She slipped the glass plate into the developer, rocking the tray gently. The image bloomed slowly, a ghost emerging from the milky emulsion. It was faint, captured in the last dregs of light. But it was undeniable. 2 men, the crate, the small, unmistakable shape of the timer. A boot smashed against her door, shaking the entire room. "Eliza Hart, open this door in the name of the law." It was Kincaid. She had seconds. The plate was wet. She could not run with it. She looked wildly around the room. Her trunk, too obvious. The door crashed open, the lock splintering. Kincaid stood there, flanked by 2 deputies. His eyes, small and dark, swept the room and landed on her developing trays. "What is this witch's brew, Miss Hart?" he sneered. "It is my work, Marshal," she said. She was standing in front of the tray, her body shielding the image. "We heard you have been stirring up trouble," Kincaid said, advancing into the room. "Asking questions, talking to the hostiles out at Bitter Spring. I am a journalist. I talk to everyone." "You are an instigator," he said. He nodded to his men. "She is under arrest for conspiring with the savages, inciting riot." "That is absurd. I did nothing." "Grab her!" A deputy lunged and seized her arms, wrenching them behind her back. The other deputy, a brutish man with a vacant expression, moved toward her equipment. "This is evidence," the deputy said. "Then destroy it," Kincaid ordered. The man smiled. He swept his arm across her workbench, sending her bottles of chemicals, her lenses, and her boxes of unused glass plates crashing to the floor. "No!" Eliza screamed. "What about this one?" "Marshal," the man said, pointing to the developing tray. "She was working on this one." He reached for it. Eliza reacted with the last weapon she had. She kicked the small table, hard. The tray flipped, sending a wave of acidic, silver nitrate-laced developer straight into the deputy's face. He howled, a high, thin sound, and staggered back, clawing at his eyes. Kincaid cursed and drew his pistol. "You little—" But Eliza was already moving. She broke free from the first deputy's grasp, grabbed the wet, dripping glass plate from the floor, wrapped it in the first piece of cloth she could find her focusing cloth, and bolted. She burst out the back door of the shop, the one that opened onto the dark alley. "Stop her! Do not let her get away!" Kincaid roared from behind. She ran. She could hear the marshal's boots pounding the dirt. The town was small, the alleys short. She burst out onto the main street, where the crowd was still mesmerized by the fire. "There she is!" a man shouted. Eliza saw Toby, the 10-year-old bootblack boy, watching from the shadows of the hotel porch. He saw everything in this town. He saw the panic in her eyes, and he saw Kincaid emerge from the alley, raising his gun. Toby acted. He was small and quick as a water bug. He darted forward and kicked his heavy wooden shine box directly into the marshal's shins. Kincaid bellowed in pain and stumbled, his shot going wild, shattering the hotel window. "Run, miss!" Toby yelled. Eliza did not need to be told twice. She wrenched free of the man who grabbed at her coat. She ran, clutching the precious, fragile plate to her chest. She ran past the last lighted building, past the horse corrals, and into the broken, dark land at the edge of town. She scrambled into the hills, toward the stands of yucca that marched up the ridges. She was not made for this. Her boots were thin, her lungs on fire. She could hear them behind her, crashing through the brush, their lanterns bobbing. They were horsemen. She was on foot. She fell hard, tumbling down a gravelly slope. Her hands and knees were raw. She checked the plate, her heart stopping. The thick cloth had protected it. It was not cracked. "This way, I heard her!" a voice shouted. "They were close!" She crawled into a dry wash, a shallow ditch that offered no real cover. It was a dead end. She pressed herself against the cold rock, gasping for breath, cornered. A hand, hard as cured leather, clamped over her mouth, stifling her scream. An arm, strong as iron, wrapped around her waist and lifted her bodily from the ground. "Be still," a voice whispered in her ear. "Ashkenaz." He had seen the fire from the high mesas. He knew, with a tracker's certainty, what it was, a signal, a lie. He had come to watch, to see Pikes move. He had seen the girl run. He pulled her up, out of the wash and into a narrow cleft in the rock, a space no wider than a man's shoulders. He held her against the cold stone, his hand firm over her mouth, his body shielding hers from the open. The pursuers, Kincaid's men, clattered into the wash just below them. Where did she go? She was right here. She must have gone up the ridge. Spread out, find her. Their lanterns and curses moved away, up the wrong slope. Ashki did not move for a full minute. Eliza was pressed against him, rigid. She could feel the heat of his body through his simple cotton shirt, the steady, slow rhythm of his breathing. He smelled of cedar smoke and the dry, clean dust of the canyons. He finally removed his hand. "You make a great deal of noise when you run," he whispered. They tried to arrest me," Eliza panted, her voice trembling. "They destroyed my work. They said I conspired with—" "With us," Ashki finished. "You did. You conspired to see the truth. In Dry Mesa, it is the same thing." He looked at the dark, wrapped object in her hands. "What is that?" "Proof," she said. her voice gaining a sliver of strength. "I photographed them. Pike's men. Just before the explosion. They were setting a timer." Ashki's expression did not change, but his eyes hardened in the dark. He understood everything in that one sentence. The lie, the frame, the land grab. "They will not stop looking for you," he said. "Come, you cannot stay here." He took her hand. His grip was not gentle, but it was absolute. He led her out of the cleft and into the darkness. He did not follow a path. He made one, moving through the landscape with a silent, fluid grace. Up rock faces and along ledges she could barely see. He led her into the heart of the canyons, into the red rock fortress of his people. They walked for hours. Eliza was stumbling, her boots and her will worn down to nothing. Finally, he stopped. They were in a small, hidden box canyon. A few hogans, low and solid, blended into the earth. They were temporary, the shelters of a clan that knew how to move. He paused at the blanket-covered doorway of the largest one. He was hesitating. She could feel it. He was bringing the white man's war to his family's fire. He was risking them. For her. She watched him struggle. He was a man caught between the past and a terrible future. But then he looked down at the wrapped plate in her hands. He thought of the dry creek bed. He thought of the pipe. If he turned her away, the truth died with her, and his people would be driven out by a lie. He pulled back the blanket. "Enter," he said. The hogan was dark, save for the red glow of a central fire pit. It smelled of smoke and wool and safety. An old woman sat by the fire, her hands busy with a spindle. Her face was a beautiful, complex map of wrinkles, and her eyes were as bright and sharp as chips of obsidian. She looked at Eliza, then at Ashki. She did not seem surprised. Ashki spoke in Dain, his voice low and urgent. He explained the fire, the pursuit, the woman, the picture. The old woman, Nali Ada, his grandmother, looked at Eliza. She nodded slowly. "She is afraid," Nali Ada said. Her English was as careful and precise as her grandson's. "I am," Eliza admitted, her voice cracking. "Good. Fear keeps a person honest." Nali Ada looked at Ashki. "You did right to bring her. Bartholomew Pike fights with lies. We must fight with what we have." She gestured to the fire. "Truth needs legs to walk through a storm. This one." She nodded at Eliza. "Maybe the legs." Nali Ada gave Eliza a bowl of hot corn stew and a sheepskin to sit on. The warmth was life. Ashki sat across the fire from her, his rifle across his knees. The silence stretched. "My father was a journalist," Eliza said, needing to fill the space, to explain herself. "He used a pen. He told me a gun ends an argument, but the truth starts one." She looked at the wrapped plate by her side. "I chose this. My camera. I thought it was a way to watch without being part of it." "You are part of it," Ashki said simply, his voice flat. "You were part of it the moment you saw the water. That is why they came for you. Not the fire, the water." He finally met her gaze. "You think you are hiding a photograph. You are wrong. You are hiding our farms. You are hiding our sheep. That glass plate is the only thing stopping Pike from sending Kincaid and his guns to drive us from this valley. He needed an excuse. The fire is his excuse. He will say we are violent. He will say we must be moved for the safety of the new railroad." Eliza looked at the burning logs. "He is building a case to steal the land." "He is," Ashki agreed. "And you, Eliza Hart, are the one witness who can stop him." They heard the distant sound of shod horses on rock. A patrol. They were searching the canyons. Eliza grabbed the plate. "If they find it!" Ashki looked around the hogan. It was simple, sparse. There was nowhere to hide anything. Nali Ada stood. She walked to her large, upright loom, where a half-finished blanket glowed with patterns of red and black. Beside it was a long, narrow wooden box, carved with the patterns of the rain. She opened it. Inside were her tools heavy, polished battens for beating the wool, and a long, fork-like weaving comb. "Here," she said. Eliza looked. The glass plate was almost the exact width. She slid it in, flat along the bottom. Nali Ada placed the heavy wooden tools back on top, covering it completely. She closed the lid. It was just an old woman's sewing box. They heard the rider stop outside. "Ashki Nes," it was Kincaid's voice. Ashki rose and stepped out of the hogan, blocking the door, silhouetted against the night. Eliza and Nali Ada waited in the dark. "Marshal," Ashki said, "we are hunting for that woman, the photographer. She ran this way. I have seen no one." "Do not lie to me, boy." Kincaid dismounted. He shoved Ashki aside and peered into the darkness of the hogan. Eliza held her breath. Kincaid's eyes scanned the interior. He saw an old woman sitting at a loom. He saw a dead fire pit and a few blankets. He saw nothing. "She is not here," Nali Ada said, her voice calm. "Only my grandson and I. We prepare for the night." Kincaid stared, his suspicion palpable. He looked at the weaving box. He looked at the loom. He saw nothing but poverty. "You see her, you tell me," Kincaid snarled. "Your time is running out. Ashki, Pike is done playing nice." He turned and mounted his horse. The patrol rode away. Eliza let out a breath that hurt her lungs. Ashki stepped back inside, his face grim. "He will be back." "I have to get this to Santa Fe," Eliza said, her voice hard with new resolve. "To the territorial court, to the newspapers." "That is a long walk," Ashki said, "and they will be watching every road." "I do not care. I will not let them win with this lie." He looked at her, this small, stubborn woman who had thrown chemicals in a deputy's face and run into the wilderness. She had not broken. He had saved her. His grandmother had hidden her proof. They were now bound by the same secret, the same enemy. "You will not go alone," he said. It was not an offer. It was a statement of fact. Pike wants the land. Kincaid wants an excuse to take it. They will hunt you. But now, they will hunt me too. Eliza looked at the simple wooden box that held her complex. Dangerous truth, a partnership, born of fire and desperation, had been sealed in the smoky air of the hogan. The sun rose on a world that had changed. Eliza had barely slept. The hard-packed earth of the hogan floor a poor substitute for a bed. When she emerged, Ashki was already on the ridge above the hidden canyon, a motionless silhouette against the pale, sharp light. He was watching the smoke that still rose from dry mesa. The fire was out, but the air smelled of ash. He had sent a scout at first light, a young, fast runner, to move unseen into the town and read the wind. The boy returned just before mid-morning, his chest heaving. He brought news, and it was all bad. Bartholomew Pike had not waited. "It is posted," the boy said, speaking in hurried English for Eliza's benefit. "A new law, nailed to the marshal's office." Ashki's face was grim. "What law?" "A decree. It has Pike's name and a big seal. It says for the safety of the railroad. All dine are to be moved. It says we must be relocated to the eastern reservation, away from the valley." Eliza felt a cold sickness in her stomach. "He is doing it. He is using the fire." "There is more," the boy said, looking at Ashki with fear. "Marshal Kincaid has posted another paper, a reward." "For the woman?" Ashki asked. "No, for you." The boy pointed. "It says Ashki Nez. It says, wanted for sabotage of the railroad. It promises $100, dead or alive." Silence descended on the small camp. Nali Ada, who had been grinding corn, did not stop. The rhythmic scrape of stone on stone the only sound. "So," Ashki said, his voice quiet, "he has given me a name, and he has given me a price. He is using the fire to justify stealing the valley, and he is using you as the face of the crime," Eliza said, her anger a hot, dry stone in her throat. "He has locked us out. We have the proof. But we cannot get near the town. Ashki shook his head. This is not enough. He looked at Eliza. The glass plate shows the fire was a lie, but it does not show why he said it. The water, Eliza said, understanding. The diversion to his silver mine. Yes, the white man's court will want more than a picture of two men in the dark. They will want a map. They will want to see the theft you spoke of. Eliza thought of her room, of the men she had seen. Then she remembered the wagons parked near the half-built station, the engineer's wagon. He has one, she said. The railroad engineer. I saw his wagon. He must have plans, surveys, a map of the diversion. That wagon is in Dry Mesa, Ashki said. And you are a ghost. Kincaid's men are hunting you. I am a target. We cannot go back. I can, Eliza said. You cannot. They are looking for a man. They are looking for me. But they will look for me running away from town, not back into it. I need that map. Ashki, the plate and the map, together. That is a story they cannot ignore. He argued. It was suicide. It was a trap. But she was as unmoving as the mesa. Your grandmother gave me this blanket, she said, touching the dark wool. In the dark. I am just another shadow. I will go tonight. I need to get my mule. Anyway, I will get the map, and I will meet you. I will not let you go alone, he said. You will not be with me, but you will be watching. That night, Dry Mesa was a different town. It was not a place of work. It was a place of occupation. Kincaid had deputized a half-dozen of Pike's rougher railroad security men. They stood on every corner, their rifles held ready. Eliza moved through the alleys she had run from only the night before. She kept the dark blanket low, her face hidden. The town was seething. She slipped past the shanty town, the collection of tents and crude lean-tos where the Mexican track layers and the free black laborers lived. Usually, the camp was filled with music and the smell of cooking. Tonight, it was silent. She saw a cluster of men arguing with a company guard at the main water barrel. What do you mean? No ration? A man yelled, his voice thick with a Spanish accent. Orders from Mr. Pike, the guard said, spitting tobacco. Water is for railroad use only, until the crisis is over. You got a problem. You take it up with the Indians who burned our warehouse and poisoned the well. We have worked 12 hours. We need water. Go drink whiskey, the guard sneered, patting his shotgun. Eliza shrank back into the shadows. Pike was tightening the screws. He was cutting off the water to the laborers, blaming the Navajo, turning the entire thirsty town against them. It was brilliant. It was evil. She reached the rail yard. It was quiet, guarded only by one man who was looking toward the light of the saloon. She slipped past him and reached the engineer's wagon. The door was unlocked. Her heart hammered so hard she thought the guard must hear it. She slid inside, into the darkness that smelled of canvas and oiled paper. She risked one match. It flared, blinding her for a second. She shielded the tiny flame with her body. Papers everywhere, charts, lists of supplies, timetables. And then she saw it, rolled in a corner. A hydrological survey. She unrolled it. The match burned her fingers. She dropped it, cursed, and lit another. There it was. It was all there, drawn in neat, professional ink. The main creek bed at Bitter Spring, the new illegal dam, and the diversion pipe, a thick black line that snaked, not toward the town of Dry Mesa, but 2 miles west, to a detailed grid labeled Pike Silver Mine and Ore Wash. She had it. The why. She rolled the map and shoved it deep into her shirt. She slipped out of the wagon. The guard had not moved. She made it to the alley, to the stable where her mule. Bess was still boarded. She paid the sleepy stable boy with the last of her silver, saddled the animal, and led her into the street. A low, soft call, the whistle of a canyon wren. It came from the darkness beyond the last building. Ashki. He had been there all along. She mounted the mule and rode, not running, just moving at a steady walk, out of the light and into the safety of the dark. When she returned to the hogan, Nalieda and Ashki looked at the map by the fire. "This is the tongue of the snake," Nalieda said, her finger tracing the ink line. "Now we have the whole story," Eliza said. She was shaking from the adrenaline. "The plate shows the crime. The map shows the motive." She looked at Ashki. "Santa Fe is too far. Pike will have the telegraphs watched. Kincaid's men will be on every stage." "Fort Wingate," Ashki said, his eyes on the map. "It is closer. The district court is there, the army. They have the only authority that can stop Pike. Can we make it?" "The main road is a death trap," he said. He dragged a finger through the dirt floor of the hogan, drawing his own map. "But there is another way. Coyote Wash. It is a hard path, dry, but it cuts behind the mesas. They will not look for us there. It is our land." They left before dawn. Nalieda packed them dried meat and a small bag of cornmeal. She gave the precious weaving comb box to Eliza, who secured it in her saddlebag. "Hozo," Nalieda said to her, "a blessing. Walk in beauty." They traveled for a full day. Eliza riding Bess, Ashki walking ahead, his moccasins making no sound. The wash was brutal. The sun hammered them. The red rock walls reflected the heat until Eliza felt her skin was cooking. Late in the afternoon, Ashki stopped. "Ahead," he said. "We stop here." Eliza saw nothing but more rock. Then, tucked into a bend in the canyon, she saw a small, crumbling adobe mission, a cross leaning precariously on its roof. A thin wisp of smoke rose from a chimney. A woman in a simple gray habit was on her knees, tending a small, defiant patch of scorched-looking beans. She looked up as they approached, her face weathered but her eyes sharp. "Ashki Nez," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. She stood, wiping her hands on her habit. "I heard they put a price on your head." "Sister May," Ashki said, nodding in respect. "We need water and medicine. My friend fell." Sister May's gaze moved to Eliza. She saw the exhaustion, the dried blood on her palms. "You must be the photographer," she said. It was not a question. "The whole town is buzzing about you. Come inside. You are safe here." Inside, the mission was cool and smelled of lime and herbs. Sister May gave them fresh water from an olla that sweated in the corner. It was the best water Eliza had ever tasted. As Eliza washed the grit from her hands and face, Sister May spoke to Ashki in a low voice. "You are not just running from Kincaid, Ashki," she said. "We know. Pike has deputies." "He does not," Sister May said, her face grim. "He has an army, a private one. They rode in this morning, 20 men, hard men, not railroad guards. They are camped by the mine." Ashki absorbed this, his body tensing. "Pike is not waiting for the law. He is making his own." Sister May put a hand on his arm, her expression serious. "And he brought a man to lead them, a professional. His name is Ephraim Cole." Eliza stopped washing. The name meant nothing to her, but Ashki's reaction was terrifying. He did not move, but a stillness came over him, a complete absence of motion that was more violent than a curse. "Ephraim Cole," Ashki repeated. He knew the name. Everyone in the territory knew it. "Who is he?" Eliza asked, drying her hands. "A ghost," Sister May said. "A myth. He was a sharpshooter in the war. They say he can track a man across bare rock and hit a silver dollar at 400 yards. She looked at Ashki. "He is not a drunk bully like Kincaid. He is a hunter, and he has never failed to bring in his bounty. He will not stop. Ashki, he will not sleep. He will find you." The reality of their situation settled on Eliza. This was no longer about escaping. This was about being hunted. They left the mission an hour later, their canteens full, Eliza's hands bandaged. They traveled until the sun was completely gone, making a cold camp under a rock overhang. They dared not light a fire. The night was vast, and the stars looked like cold, sharp points of glass. They sat in silence for a long time, the weight of Sister May's warning between them. "This has changed," Eliza said, her voice barely a whisper. She was clutching the heavy saddlebag that held the weaving box. "This man, Cole, he is hunting you for money, and he is hunting me for this." She patted the box. "They are the same hunt," Ashki said. "He could offer you the bounty," she said, thinking aloud. "He could offer you the $100. He could promise to leave your people alone if you give me up." Ashki looked at her, his face a mask of shadows. He did not deny it. He considered it, as a man considers a map. $100 is a great deal of money, he said. "It would feed my clan for a season, but it would not buy the spring. It would not buy the valley." He looked at the weaving box, then at her. "You have the proof, the glass and the paper. That is your weapon." He touched the ground. "This is mine, the path, the way." "Then we make a pact," Eliza said, needing to hear it spoken. "You are the guide, I am the witness. You keep the way, I keep the proof. Neither of us falters, no matter what they offer." Ashki met her gaze. His eyes were not warm, but they were absolute. "This is not a pact, Eliza Hart. This is survival. We get this box to Fort Wingate, or we both die in this canyon. There is no other path." She nodded, accepting the brutal simplicity of it. She looked down at her bandaged hands. "I am sorry I brought this to you." "You did not bring it," he said. "You only saw it. The storm was already here. You just gave it a name." He looked at her, at this strange, soft woman who had run into the desert clutching a piece of glass. She was not a warrior. She was not a tracker, but she was not weak. "My father," she said, her voice quiet. He would have been good at this, the danger, the story. I am not like him. I just want the truth to be enough." "It is never enough," Ashki said, "but sometimes it is all you have." He took his own wool blanket, the one he had slept with, and tore a long strip from the edge. He wordlessly took her hand, the one that was not bandaged, the one she had cut on the rocks when she fell. He wrapped the dark wool around her raw palm. His touch was rough, his fingers calloused, but he was careful. It was not a caress. It was the practical, necessary act of mending a tool. She did not pull away. He did not linger. They sat in the cold desert night. Two people from different worlds, bound by a common enemy and a truth no one wanted told. It was a new kind of closeness, built not on promises, but on the shared, solid ground of respect. The dawn in Coyote Wash was a false promise, a cool, quiet hour that masked the tension of the day to come. They had been moving since first light, Ashki leading the mule, his steps as silent and deliberate as a prayer. Eliza followed, the heavy weaving comb box in her saddlebag. The air was still, and the silence of the high-walled canyon amplified every sound: the scrape of Bess's hoof on stone, the creak of Eliza's saddle leather. Ashki stopped. He did not turn or raise his hand. He simply ceased to exist, blending into the rock. Eliza reined in the mule. "What is it?" she whispered. "The wind," he said, his voice barely a breath. "It just changed direction, and it is carrying sand from above." Eliza scanned the rim rock, 200 feet above them. The edge was a clean line against the blue sky. She saw nothing. "I do not see anyone." "He is there." A puff of white dust, no bigger than a man's hand, exploded on the canyon wall. 20 feet to their left, the sound reached them a moment later, a flat, hard crack that was unlike any rifle shot she had ever heard. It was not a boom. It was a vicious snap. Bess screamed, rearing, her eyes rolling white. The sound of the shot echoed, bouncing from wall to wall, sounding like a dozen guns. "It is a warning," Ashki said, his voice dangerously calm as he fought to control the terrified mule. "He is showing us he is there. He is showing us he can—" Another shot, This one struck the sand 10 feet in front of them, kicking up a fountain of red grit. It was not a shot to kill. It was a shot to herd. Ephraim Cole was playing with them. "He wants us to run," Ashki said, his eyes scanning the opposite wall. "Back toward the mouth of the wash, where his men are waiting." "What do we do?" Eliza's hands were clamped on the saddle horn. "We do not go back." Ashki grabbed the mule's bridle. "We go forward. Move, now." He pulled the mule into a jarring trot. They ran, the animal's hooves clattering on the rocky bed. Another shot whined past Eliza's ear, so close she felt the pressure of it. It struck the rock just behind her. The warning was over. "He is trying to drive us," Eliza yelled. "He is testing us," Ashki called back, his eyes fixed on the canyon wall ahead. He suddenly veered left, pulling the mule and Eliza straight toward what looked like a solid cliff face. "It is a dead end," she cried, pulling back on the reins. "No," he pointed. A dark line, a vertical fissure in the sandstone, barely wider than her shoulders. "A slot canyon. Go, now, leave the mule." "I cannot. The plate, the map." "Give me the box." Ashki ripped the heavy weaving comb box from the saddlebag. He grabbed the satchel containing the map and her other camera. He thrust them both into her arms. "Go!" He slapped Bess hard on the rump. The mule, panicked and free, bolted down the main wash. A perfect, noisy diversion. "In," Ashki commanded. He shoved Eliza toward the narrow opening. The slot canyon was another world. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. The light was a dim, purple glow. The walls were sculpted, smooth as water-worn stone. The rifle shots stopped. They were hidden from Cole's line of sight. They paused, breathing hard, the sound of their own lungs deafening in the sudden quiet. Eliza looked back. The entrance was a bright, vertical slash of light, framing the main wash outside. She could hear distant, confused shouts. Cole's men, following the mule. She looked at that rectangle of light. It was chaos framed by peace. It was danger framed by sanctuary. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling. "We must keep moving. He will find this entrance." "Just 1 minute." She was already fumbling, pulling her smaller camera from the satchel Ashki had saved. This is it?" "Are you insane?" Ashki hissed, his hand on his knife. "He is trying to kill us." "He is," she corrected, her hands suddenly steady as she planted the small tripod in the sand. "My father wrote about this. The moment the bullet is in the air, the moment before the world changes." She ducked under the focusing cloth. There it was, the upside-down image of the canyon mouth, a gateway of blinding, hostile light. She uncapped the lens. "This is the moral weight of it," she whispered, her voice muffled. "This is what it means to choose." A bullet struck the stone near the entrance. Not a shot at them, but near them. A new warning. Cole knew where they were. The ricochet screamed into their narrow passage. Deafening. Ashki did not wait. He grabbed Eliza by the arm, pulling her away from the camera. "You have your picture. Now we move." He grabbed the tripod and camera and pulled her deeper into the winding subterranean darkness. They walked for 2 hours, emerging from the narrow cut into a different, wider valley, miles from where they had started. They were safe for the moment, but Ashki was holding his left arm tight against his body. "You are hurt," Eliza said. He looked down. A dark stain was spreading on his shirt, high on the shoulder. It was not a clean wound, a chip of rock or a lead fragment from the ricochet. "It is nothing," he said, but his face was pale, tight with pain. "It is not nothing," she insisted. "It will fester. We need help." Ashki was silent for a long moment. "There is a place, a man. He is not a friend, but he hates Bartholomew Pike more than he hates us." He led her not to a town, but to a miserable dugout cut into a hillside, a place that smelled of sour whiskey and carbolic acid, A thin, shaking man sat outside in a broken chair, a bottle dangling from his hand. He had the red, broken veins of a man who drank away the daylight. "Dr. Holland," Ashki said. The man squinted up, his eyes struggling to focus. "Ashki Nez, the $100 man. You are either very brave or very stupid to come here." "He is hurt," Eliza said, stepping forward. Dr. Holland's gaze drifted to her. "And Miss Hart, the ghost of the rail yard. Kincaid is turning over every rock for you." "What a fine pair." He sighed, a long, rattling sound, and used the chair to push himself to his feet. "Well, hell, I suppose my oath still means something. Even if I do not, bring him in. But if Cole follows you here, I am claiming the bounty on both of you." The dugout was cleaner inside than out. Medical books lined a shelf. Instruments boiled in a pot on a small stove. Dr. Holland was a drunk, but he was still a doctor. "Shirt off," he grumbled. He cut the fabric away. My, a nasty souvenir from Mr. Cole, I presume." He probed the wound. Ashki did not flinch, but a muscle in his jaw jumped. "It is deep. A piece of lead, maybe some rock. I have to cut it out." Eliza handed him clean cloths. Holland's hands, which had trembled outside, were now rock steady as he held the scalpel. He worked fast. Ashki's face was a mask, his eyes fixed on a crack in the ceiling. "There," Holland said, dropping a ragged metal fragment into a tin bowl. It rang with a dull click. "It is out. Now for the needle." As he stitched, he talked, his voice a low growl. "Pike is a cancer, you know that. He came to me last week, wanted me to sign a paper, swear that the Navajo water at Bitter Spring was full of cholera. A lie, of course. It is cleaner than the town pump." "Why did you not sign?" Eliza asked, holding the lantern steady. "Because my wife is buried out near that spring," Holland said, his voice suddenly quiet, the gruffness gone. "She died of a real fever. 10 years ago. I will not have her memory poisoned by his lies." He tied off the last stitch, his work neat. He looked at Eliza. "She was beautiful. I do not have a picture of her, not a good one." Eliza understood. "When this is over, if I can, I will take a photograph of her grave for you." Holland looked at her, his red-rimmed eyes suddenly watery. "No, not of the grave." He pointed to the tin bowl. "Take a picture of that, the bullet fragment, and if you get out of this, you tell them Dr. Holland cut it out. Let that be my testimony." He bandaged Ashki's shoulder with a firm hand. "Now, get out. You have put my life in enough danger. Go east and stay off the ridges." As they fled east, a different meeting was taking place. Nali Ada walked, not into dry mesa, but to the surveyor's camp near the railroad. She carried a small, perfectly woven rug. She found the man she was looking for, Engineer Whitcomb, an older man with a worried face, the man who had drawn the map Eliza had stolen. "You are the map maker," Nali Ada said, approaching him directly. Whitcomb started, looking around for Pike's guards. "Go away, old woman. It is not safe." "You drew the line that takes our water," she said. It was a statement of fact. I draw what I am paid to draw." Whitcomb stammered. "It is just a job. Hydraulics." "You have grandchildren?" she asked. The question hit him. "Yes, 2, in Pennsylvania." "Will you tell them you drew a map that starved children?" Nali Ada held out the small rug. "I made this. It is the pattern of the Bitter Spring. I will trade you this for the real map." "The real map," he whispered. "The one you did not give to Mr. Pike. The one that shows the true specifications. The one that proves the dam is not for the railroad, but for the mine. The one that proves it is built badly and will fail in the first spring flood." Whitcomb looked pale. He was a good engineer. He knew it was true. "He will hang me if he knows," Whitcomb said. "He will starve us if he does not," Nali Ada replied. The engineer looked at the small, perfect rug. He looked at the old woman's unblinking, patient eyes. He was a man cornered by his own conscience. He vanished into his tent. He returned moments later, stuffing the rug into his coat. He pressed a heavy, rolled tube of oilcloth into her hands. "These are the technical schematics," he whispered, his voice shaking. "It proves the flow rate. It proves the faulty construction. It is my confession." "You are a good man, mapmaker," Naliada said. "No," Whitcomb said, turning away. "I am a coward, but I would like to see my grandchildren again." That evening, Eliza and Ashki made a cold camp. Ashki sat apart, his wounded shoulder a dull throb. Eliza pulled her father's journal from her satchel. She turned to the last entries. "Written in Colorado." His handwriting was frantic. "They are threatening me. A land and water company. They say if I print the truth about the water rights, I will not leave the state alive. They are using the law, using hired guns. They say I am inciting the settlers." Eliza's breath caught. It was her story. It was the same story. She read the last line he ever wrote. "I am afraid, but the story must be told. If you must choose, Eliza, always choose the weak. Their truth is the one that gets buried." She closed the book, her heart aching. She was not just fulfilling his legacy. She was reliving his final days. She looked at Ashki. He was touching the small, wooden amulet he wore around his neck, his silence heavy with pain. "The man," Ashki said, his voice low. "Dr. Holland, he spoke of his wife's grave." "Yes," Eliza said softly. "My brother, he does not have a grave." Eliza waited. She knew this was a threshold. "It was during the long walk," he said, his voice flat, reciting a history that lived in his blood. "We were driven from our homes, marched for hundreds of miles, to Bosque Redondo. It was a prison, not a reservation." His hand tightened on the amulet. "My little brother, he was 6 years old. He was not strong. The soldiers, they did not stop. My mother was carrying my sister. My father was weak with fever. I was holding his hand. He stumbled." Ashki's voice did not break. "He fell. I tried to pull him up. A soldier hit me with his rifle. He told me to keep moving. I looked back. My brother, he was just sitting in the snow, alone. We were not allowed to stop." He turned his head, showing her the scar that ran across his back, the one she had only glimpsed before. The soldier's scar healed. The other did not. Eliza felt the story settle in her. She wanted to say something. "I am sorry. I understand." But the words were cheap. They were white man's comfort. So she said nothing. She moved, closing the few feet between them. She sat down next to him, her shoulder almost touching his good one. She did not touch him. She did not speak. She just sat, sharing the silence in the cold dusk. After a long time, he spoke again. "He gave me this." He touched the amulet. "A piece of wood from our hogan, our home. I keep it. To remember that a home is not a place you can leave. It is a place you must protect." "You are protecting it now, Ashki," she whispered. "Pike, Cole, they are the new soldiers," he said. "They just wear different coats." They were moving again when Ashki saw the bird. It was a dead crow, tied to a yucca stalk, its wings spread in a mockery of flight. Ashki stopped, his hand up. He knelt, studying the ground. "Cole," he pointed to a single, perfect boot print. "He was here. He is ahead of us." "But how we came through the slot canyon?" "He is a hunter," Ashki said. "He did not follow us. He knew us. He knew this wash was the only way east. He let us run. He went around. He is waiting." Then Eliza saw it, pinned to the dead crow's chest by a small, bone-handled knife, a scrap of greasy linen. "No," Eliza whispered. She recognized it. It was from Toby's shine box. Ashki pulled the knife free. There was a piece of paper, folded. It was a bootblack's token, good for one shine. On the back, One word was scrawled in charcoal: Cactus Bridge. Under the token, on the bird's chest, was a dark, bloody smear. Eliza felt her knees give way.
He has him. He has Toby, that little boy. This is my fault. He helped me.
He did not catch him by accident, Ushki said, his voice hard as stone. He is sending a message. He is not just hunting us. He is pulling a leash. He wants to trade, Eliza said, her voice hollow. Toby, for the plate. It is a trap. I do not care. We cannot let him hurt that boy. He is just a child. It is a trap, Ushki repeated, his patience thin. Cactus Bridge is a narrow gorge. One way in, one way out. He will be on the rim. He will kill us, take the plate, and kill the boy anyway. Then I will go alone, Eliza said, her eyes flashing. I will give him what he wants. I will trade myself for Toby. No! Ushki's good hand grabbed her arm. His grip was steel. You said it yourself. You are the witness. If you are dead, the truth is dead. Pike wins.
He is a child,
she cried, tears of rage blurring her vision. And we are at war, Ushki shouted back, his face inches from hers. The force of it silenced her. He let her go, his anger vanishing, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. You are right. We cannot leave the boy. But we will not go to be executed. We will go to fight. How he is on the rimrock. He is Ephraim Cole. He wants the plate. Ushki said, he wants the proof you are carrying. He looked at the heavy wooden weaving comb box. But he does not know what it looks like. He has only heard rumor. Eliza looked at her satchel, at her box of fresh, unused glass plates.
A fake,
she whispered. We give him a fake plate. We give him a piece of glass. Ushki said, we make a plan. We get the boy. We keep the proof. That night, they made a hidden camp. They sat by the smallest fire, shielded by rock. He will be watching for light. Ushki said, then we will use it. Eliza said, she pulled out her box of fresh plates. She held one up. This is what he wants. A blank. She looked at Ushki. Tomorrow, you are going to be a photographer. She began to explain the process. It is just chemistry and light. You have to know how it thinks. She showed him her smaller camera. This is the lens. It gathers the world. This is the plate. It holds it. It is like you're tracking. You see the print in the sand. I see the light on the glass. He listened, his focus absolute. He touched the camera. The lens. It sees the light we do not see. He murmured, it steals a shadow. It does not steal, she said softly. It holds, it remembers. He nodded. Then he took her hand, placing it palm down on the cold sand. Now, I will teach you. Close your eyes. She did. What do you feel? Sand, she said. Grit, it is cold. Listen harder. He pressed her hand down. Feel the vibration. The earth is not dead. It is sleeping, a horse walking a mile away. I can feel it here. She concentrated, breathing slowly, trying to feel what he felt. She felt the wind. She felt the cold. And then a tiny, faint, rhythmic pulse. A rabbit, she whispered. He smiled, a rare, quick flash of his teeth in the dark. You are learning. Tomorrow, you will not be a photographer. You will be a shadow. And I will be the light. Cactus Bridge was not a bridge. It was a single, ancient log, bleached white by the sun, thrown across a 30-foot chasm. Below it, the dry wash was a graveyard of boulders. On the far side of the chasm, 100 feet away, a smaller, newer rope and plank bridge used by Pike's surveyors hung precariously. They were in a trap. Ephraim Cole was not visible. He was a voice, disembodied and calm, from the rimrock high above. The exchange is simple. Miss Hart. The voice drifted down, unnervingly polite. You place the box on the log. You walk back, my man brings the boy. Then you and the tracker are free to go."
"He is lying,"
Ashki whispered. He was hidden in a cluster of rocks 50 yards back, his shoulder a dull, throbbing ache beneath his shirt.
"I know,"
Eliza whispered back. She clutched the decoy box. It held a single, blank glass plate, wrapped in her father's handkerchief. The real evidence, the weaving comb box with the true plate and the engineer's map, was buried deep in her saddlebag, hidden with her mule a mile away. "Where is he?" she breathed. "I see him," Ashki said. "High, on the east rim, in the shadow. He has a rifle, a big one. And Toby, I see him, too, west rim. A different man holds him, near the edge." "What about your light?" she asked. Ashki held up the brass lens he had taken from her spare camera. It gleamed, a perfect circle of captured sun. "The man holding the boy is squinting. The sun is in his eyes. He is the one. I will be the light. You just be the shadow." "Throw the box, Miss Hart," Cole's voice commanded, "or the boy learns to fly." "I am coming," Eliza called out, her voice thin. She stepped into the open, her hands holding the small wooden box. She walked toward the log, her boots slipping on the loose gravel. She could see Toby now. He was small, his hands tied. A large bearded man held him by the collar. She reached the edge of the chasm. "On the log, slide it to the middle," Cole ordered. Eliza knelt. She placed the box on the smooth wood. She gave it a push. It slid, stopping neatly in the center. "Good girl," Cole's voice purred. "Now, walk back, slowly." Eliza stood. She began to walk backward, her eyes locked on Toby. "Now," Ashki whispered from the rocks. He raised the lens. He caught the full, brutal force of the afternoon sun and focused it into a single, blinding point of white fire. He did not aim at Cole. He aimed at the man holding Toby. The man roared, dropping the boy and clapping his hands to his face. The image of the sun burned onto his retinas. "Now, Marshal," Cole's voice was no longer calm. It was a furious bellow. It happened all at once. Marshal Kincaid and 4 deputies burst from a hidden side canyon, their guns drawn, blocking the only exit. "Hold it right there. Ashki, we got you boxed." Cole's rifle cracked from the rim. The shot was not at Eliza. It was at Ashki's cover. Stone chips exploded where he had been. "It is a trap!" Eliza screamed, diving for the ground. Another rifle shot. Kincaid's men opened fire, their bullets kicking up dust around Ashki's rocks. Cole's man on the west rim, his vision returning, grabbed for Toby. "I have the boy." "The plate," Cole roared. "Get the plate." The bearded man scrambled onto the log, moving toward the box. Ashki rose from his cover. He was not aiming at Cole. He was not aiming at Kincaid. He fired one shot. His rifle, a Winchester, was loud in the narrow canyon. The bullet did not hit a man. It hit the frayed, heavy rope anchoring the other bridge, the surveyor's bridge, to the canyon wall. The rope snapped. The bridge died. With a sound of tearing wood and screaming fibers, the entire structure, planks, rope, and a discarded scaffold of tools ripped free from one side and plunged into the chasm. It hit the bottom with a catastrophic crash, throwing up a cloud of red dust, splinters, and debris that choked the air, instantly obscuring everything. "Get Toby!" Ashki roared, emerging from the dust cloud like a phantom. Eliza was already moving. She scrambled to where the boy had fallen. She grabbed his arm. "Run!" "The plate!" the bearded man choked, now trapped on the log in the middle of the blinding dust. Kincaid's men were firing blind. "Where are they? I cannot see." "This way!" Ashki's voice cut through the chaos. He grabbed Eliza's other hand. He did not lead her back toward Kincaid's blocked exit. He led her straight toward the sheer canyon wall. They ran, Toby coughing between them. Bullets whined through the red fog. "Here!" Ashki shoved them into a dark opening, a shallow cave pitted with holes, like a giant piece of honeycomb. They scrambled into the rock, climbing, pulling Toby with them. They were in a maze of wind-worn sandstone, a natural ladder. The dust began to settle. Cole, on the rim, saw them. His rifle cracked again. The bullet struck the rock just by Eliza's head. She flinched, slipping on the smooth stone. The heavy satchel on her shoulder, the one with her camera, her journal, and the hidden map swung free. The strap slipped from her shoulder. She watched, horrified, as it tumbled, sliding down the rock face, heading for a 20-foot drop. "No!" she cried, lunging for it. She missed, but Ashki, moving past her, caught the leather strap with his good hand. He did not pause. He did not look at her. He just snagged it, his reflexes inhuman, and threw it back over her head, pulling her to safety in the same motion. "Keep climbing," he ordered. They reached a high, narrow ledge, screened by a curtain of ancient, dead ivy. They were hidden. Below, the canyon was clearing. Cole's men were shouting. Kincaid was cursing. "Where is the plate?" Cole's voice was pure ice. The bearded man had finally crawled back. He handed the box to Marshal Kincaid, who looked up at the rim. "I have it." "Cole," Kincaid yelled. "The evidence." He held it up. "We got them terrorizing the railroad, resisting arrest." "Open it, you fool," Cole's voice returned. Kincaid fumbled with the lid. He opened it. He pulled out the handkerchief. He stared at the blank, uncoated piece of glass. "What is this?" Kincaid looked confused. "It is just glass." A terrible, cold silence fell over the canyon. "Kincaid," Cole's voice said, and all the politeness was gone, replaced by a killing quiet. "You let them go. You let them make a fool of you. Find them. Find the woman. Find them, or Pike will have your badge in your skin." The rifle shot that followed was not a warning. Cole fired straight into the log at Kincaid's feet. The marshal yelped and scrambled backward. The hunt was on again. They ran for an hour, through the maze of honeycomb rock, until they were miles away and the sun was a red wound in the west. They found a shallow cave, barely an overhang, and collapsed. Toby was asleep, his small body exhausted, his face still streaked with dust. Eliza leaned her head back against the cold stone, her body one complete, shaking ache. Ashki stood watch, his rifle resting on the rock, his face turned toward the valley they had left. "He is good," Ashki said, his voice quiet. "You were better," Eliza said. "The bridge, that was a diversion," he said. He leaned heavily against the rock, his left arm, the one he had favored, hanging limp. Eliza saw it. His sleeve was dark, soaked from elbow to wrist. "Ashki," she whispered, "you are hurt again." He looked down, as if just noticing. "He is very good." He slid down the rock to sit, his face pale in the twilight. A bullet had torn a long, deep furrow through the flesh of his forearm. It was not a fragment. It was a clean tear, bleeding badly. His first wound, the one from Dr. Holland, had been on his shoulder. This was new. This was a direct hit. "We have to stop the bleeding," Eliza said, her panic rising. "We have little water," he said, his voice tight with pain. "We have to." She ripped a long, clean strip from the bottom of her cotton petticoat. She poured a handful of their precious drinking water onto it. The moon was rising, a thin, silver crescent. Giving just enough light, she knelt in front of him. "Give me your arm." He extended it. She pressed the wet cloth to the wound. He hissed, a sharp intake of breath, but did not move. She cleaned the wound as best she could, her hands shaking at first, then becoming steady. She saw the muscle, the pale line of bone. It was deep. She took another strip of cloth and began to bind it, pulling it brutally tight to stop the bleeding. He watched her, his dark eyes unreadable in the moonlight. "You are good at this," he said, his voice strained. "Mending." "I am learning," she said, tying the knot. You are bleeding all over my story. You are making it very difficult." Her voice was rough, trying to be hard. She tied the knot and sat back on her heels. Her hands were covered in his blood. "Do not die on my road, Ashki Nez," she said, the words coming out sharper than she intended. "Do not—" He looked at her. A long silence. The moonlight caught the faint scar on his cheek. He looked at her, and then at the vast, uncaring desert around them. "You chose the road that runs straight into the storm. Eliza Hart," he said, his voice low. "I am just walking with you." She had no answer for that. Back in Dry Mesa, the news of the failed capture spread, but it was not the news that mattered. It was the thirst. Pike had made good on his threat. The taps at the labor camp were dry. The general store, acting on Pike's orders, refused to sell food or water to anyone who was not a company man. The town, which had been simmering, now boiled. A crowd of laborers, Mexican and Irish, stood in the main street, their tools, pickaxes, and shovels in their hands. "No water, no work," a man shouted. It was the man Eliza had seen at the barrel. Kincaid, his face red with humiliation from the bridge, rode out with his deputies. "Disperse, or I will arrest you all for rioting." A rock flew from the crowd. It struck a deputy in the chest. The brawl was short, ugly, and hopeless. Kincaid and his men used their rifle butts. The strike was broken in 10 minutes. The laborers dragged their wounded back to the shantytown. From the hotel balcony, Bartholomew Pike watched. He was not smiling. "They are thirsty," he said to a man beside him. "Lock the food warehouse, all of it. They will beg for water by morning, and they will blame the Navajo." The town was his, miles away. In a hidden place in the high mesas, Ashki, his arm bound, stood before a council of his clan's elders. Nali Ada sat at the center. "Ephraim Cole has the boy." An elder said, "He will keep him, to use him again." "Bartholomew Pike has the town," another said. "He has cut them off. He starves his own workers. He will not show mercy to us." "We are trapped," said a third. "No," Ashki said. Nali Ada looked at him. "You have a plan." Pike thinks he controls the water. Ashki said, "He controls a creek. He has forgotten the source." He looked at the elders. "He has forgotten the old path." They understood. "You would block the spring itself?" an elder asked, his voice full of shock. "The one that feeds Bitter Spring." "It feeds Bitter Spring, yes," Ashki said, "but it also feeds the aquifer that Pike's Dam is illegally tapping. I will not destroy the spring. I will divert it back to its old path, a path he cannot find." "This is a great risk," Nali Ada said. "It will dry up his dam, but it will also dry up the rest of Bitter Spring. It will dry up the town's pump. It will make the town thirst." "They are already thirsty," Ashki said, his voice hard as the rock he sat on. "Pike is making them thirst, and he is using our name as the reason. It is time we give them a real reason." "They will come for us," an elder said. "Not with deputies, with an army, with coal." "Let them come," Ashki said. "Pike wants to negotiate. We will bring him to the table. We will trade water for water, our valley for his dam. It is the only move we have left." Nali Ada looked at her grandson. He was no longer just a warrior. He was a leader. She nodded. "It is decided. We will show the white man what it means to be thirsty. We will turn off the water." The source of the old path was a high, hidden fissure where the mountain wept water. It was not a spring, but a wide, slow seep that gathered in a stone basin before slipping underground. Feeding both the aquifer Pike was stealing and the distant, struggling, Bitter Spring. By the light of a high, cold moon, Ashki worked. His wounded left arm was bound tightly to his chest. His right arm, and the men of his clan, moved with a silent, desperate speed. They were not destroying, they were building. using timbers hauled from a deadfall grove and stones rolled from the hillside. They were constructing a temporary diversion dam. The work was heavy, the air thin. The plan was agonizingly simple: to block the water from the aquifer in the town and force it back into its original, ancient path, a dry channel that led deep into the Navajo heartland. It was a last, terrible gamble. High above them, on a narrow ledge overlooking the entire operation, Eliza Hart was also working. She was their lookout, but she was also their witness. She had her larger camera, the one she had retrieved from the stable, set up on its heavy tripod. The moon was bright enough. She pulled the black cloth over her head. In the dim, upside-down world of the ground glass, she saw the men. They were silver ghosts, their muscles straining as they heaved a rock into place. This was the truth. She uncapped the lens. It was a long exposure. 10 minutes. She would take 2, perhaps 3 such pictures. She would call the series Man and Water. It would not show savagery. It would show stewardship. It would show a people protecting their lifeblood. The first plate was exposed. She was sliding it into its dark box when she saw it. Far below, at the mouth of the canyon, a glint of light, a reflection on a metal rifle barrel. It was not Kincaid's bumbling patrol. It was a line of shadows, men on foot, moving with practiced, silent skill. Pike's army. "Ashki," she hissed, her voice lost in the wind. She tried again, louder. "Ashki, they are here." The first rifle shot was the only warning. A man in Ashki's team cried out and fell, clutching his leg. Torches flared to life from the rocks below. Pike's men, at least 15 of them. Closing the trap, they were not trying to be quiet anymore. "Nali," Ashki roared, his voice echoing in the small basin. He fired his Winchester into the darkness, providing cover. "Get the children to the high crevice." The fight was immediate. A chaotic, close-quarters battle fought in the flickering light of the torches. Ashki's men were good, using the rocks they had just moved as barricades, but they were outnumbered. Eliza watched, helpless, from her perch. She saw a group of attackers, led by the same bearded man from the bridge, break free, moving to flank Ashki, trying to cut him off from the small cave where Nali, Ada, Toby, and the other children were hidden. Eliza looked around, her mind frantic. Her supplies, her satchel. She had a heavy sealed tin of lantern oil. She did not think. She acted. She grabbed the tin, uncapped it, and looked down. The attackers were passing directly below her ledge. A torch guttered on the ground near them. She poured the oil. It was a black, heavy stream that splashed onto the rocks and the men below. They looked up, confused, just as the oil hit the torch. The world exploded in a sheet of greasy, orange flame. Men screamed, their clothes alight. The pass was filled with thick, choking smoke. "Now!" Ashki yelled, his voice cutting through the panic. He ran from his cover, grabbing his grandmother by the hand, shoving Toby and the others toward a high, narrow fissure in the rock face, a place only they knew. "Go climb!" He stood at the entrance, his rifle barking, covering their retreat. He was exposed. High on the opposite rim, a single rifle cracked, a sound different from the others. Colder, more precise. Ephraim Cole. The bullet did not hit Ashki's body. It struck the center of his chest, hitting the wooden amulet his brother had given him. The impact was a physical blow. The amulet exploded into splinters. Ashki was thrown back, stumbling, a cry torn from his throat. It was not a cry of pain. It was a cry of loss. He clutched his chest, seeing the fragments of wood on his shirt. He looked up at the rim, his face a mask of pure, killing hatred. He stumbled, but he did not fall. "He is down," the bearded man yelled, his clothes still smoldering. "He is not down," a new voice snarled. Marshal Kincaid stepped out of the smoke, his pistol drawn. He was not with the attackers. He had come from behind, from inside the canyon. While Cole and the army held their attention, He had circled. He was standing right at the mouth of the crevice. Before Ashki could react, Kincaid seized Nalieda. He dragged the old woman from the fissure, pressing the muzzle of his pistol to her head. The fighting stopped. "It is over! Ashki!" Kincaid yelled, his voice shaking but triumphant. He held Nalieda in front of him. A shield. "Everyone drop your guns, or the old woman gets it. Right here, right now." Ashki's men slowly lowered their rifles. Cole's men, their faces grim, moved in, kicking the weapons away. They were captured. "I knew you would be here." Kincaid gloated, breathing hard. He looked at Ashki, who stood frozen, his hand on his empty, splintered chest. "You are finished. Your whole dam building charade is finished." "Let her go, Kincaid," Ashki said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "Oh, I will." Kincaid smiled. "I am a reasonable man." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "First, you sign this. It is a confession. You admit to the warehouse sabotage. You admit to inciting riots, and you sign the deed to this valley over to the railroad. For the good of the territory." He threw the paper on the ground. "Second, you give me the plate. The real one. The photograph." "I do not have it," Ashki said. "She does," Kincaid pointed up. "Miss Hart, I see you up there. Throw it down. Throw down the plate and the camera, or I will shoot her." Eliza froze on her ledge. All eyes turned to her. "Do not do it!" Nalieda's voice was strong. Kincaid struck her across the face. "Quiet." Ashki took a step forward. "Kincaid, let her go. Take me. I am the one you want. The $100 man. Take me. I will sign. Just let her go." "Ashki, no!" Eliza screamed from the ledge. "A noble offer," Kincaid sneered. "But I think I will have both. The signature and the plate. Then I will see about the woman." Ashki looked at his grandmother. Her face was bleeding, but her eyes were iron. He looked at his men, disarmed. He looked at Kincaid. He bent to pick up the paper. "No!" Eliza was scrambling down the rocks, her own safety forgotten. She reached him, her hands grabbing his good arm. "Ashki, do not! It is a lie!" "He will kill her," Ashki said, his voice dead. "He will kill her anyway," Eliza hissed, her face inches from his. "He will kill us anyway. This is the trap. If you sign this, you prove his lie. You tell the world he was right all along. If you fall, if you surrender, they will say we were wrong even when we were right. They will say you admitted it." "Then what do we do?" he whispered, his body torn. "We have lost." "No, we have not." She looked at the smoke, at the chaos. She still had the real plate, the map, in her satchel, hidden under the camera. "We have to run. We have to get the plate to Fort Wingate. It is the only way to save her. It is the only way this means anything. I will not leave her." "We are not leaving her. We are making her sacrifice matter." Eliza looked at Kincaid, who was watching them, his pistol still on Nolly. "We need a diversion." Ashki looked at the half-built dam, the heavy timbers, the loose rockfall they had piled. He looked at Kincaid, standing just below it. He met Eliza's eyes. He understood. "Nolly," he called out, his voice strong. "Tilgo, hurry!" He did not wait for Kincaid to react. He shoved Eliza behind him and slammed his body, with all his weight, against the key support beam of the dam. It was not meant to hold. It was temporary. The structure groaned. The rocks shifted. "He is doing it!" Kincaid yelled, raising his pistol. But it was too late. The entire, half-finished dam, tons of rock, mud, and timber collapsed. It did not hit Kincaid. It fell between them, a thundering avalanche of debris that instantly created a solid wall of dust and stone. Ephraim Cole fired from the rim, but he was shooting blind. "Go!" Ashki grabbed Eliza's hand. He did not run toward his captured men. He ran up, toward the high, dark ridges. They scrambled into the rocks, the shouts and gunfire receding behind the barrier they had made. They ran until their lungs were fire and their legs were lead. They ran until the sounds of the fight were gone, replaced by the high, cold wind. They finally stopped, miles away on a high, wind-swept mesa. They were alone. Ashki fell to his knees. He had saved Eliza. He had saved the plate. But he had left his grandmother. He had left his men. "I left her," he whispered, his voice broken. He struck the rock with his good hand. Eliza knelt beside him, breathless. She was shaking, but her resolve was hard. "You did what you had to do. You saved the truth. It is the only weapon we have left." He looked at her, his face a mask of grief and fury. "He has her. Kincaid has her. They will hurt her." "Then we make this fast," Eliza said. "We get to Fort Wingate. We expose Pike. We bring the army back. It is the only way." Ashki stood, his body rigid. He looked at the path ahead. "Kincaid will take her back to Dry Mesa. Cole will come for us." He looked at her. "We split up. He is hunting me. I am the tracker. I will lead him on a false path, toward the mountains. I will draw him away." "And me?" "You are small," he said. "You take the mule. You take the high path, the hidden one, along the mesa. It is slower, but they will not look for you there." He pointed to a deep, dark cleft in the far distance. "That is Thunder Pass. Go there. Wait for me." "And if you do not come?" she asked, her voice small. "I will come." "No, Ashki, we stay together." "No, he will find us. Together. We are a target, apart. We are a puzzle. I will lead him away. You are the only one who matters now. You and the glass." He put his hand on her shoulder, his grip tight. "I will meet you at Thunder Pass, before the sun is high tomorrow." She looked at him, at his wounded arm, his splintered chest, his exhausted, haunted eyes. He turned to leave. "Ashki," she said. He stopped. "Whoever gets there first," she said, her voice hard, "waits for the other. We do not leave anyone behind, not again." He looked at her for a long moment. He did not promise. He did not need to. He nodded, a sharp, quick gesture. Then he was gone, a shadow melting into the other shadows, running toward the high peaks, leaving her alone with the truth, the map, and the impossible weight of saving them all. The world was turning yellow. Eliza Hart had reached Thunder Pass by late afternoon, her mule exhausted. She found the high ground Ashki had described, a small niche in the rock, and she waited. She had kept her promise. The wind began to move. It was not a breeze. It was a change of direction, a heavy, gritty breath from the south. The sky, once blue, was now a sickly, pale ochre. A sandstorm was coming. She saw him, a single figure, small with the distance, running low and fast across the mesa floor. It was Ashki. He was not coming to meet her. He was being driven. He was limping, favoring his wounded arm, his body bent low. 100 yards behind him, 3 riders. They were not Kincaid's clumsy deputies. They were lean, dark shapes, Ephraim Cole's men. "Ashki!" she screamed, her voice ripped away by the rising wind. He saw her. He waved, not a greeting, but a desperate signal. "Run! Get into the pass!" he yelled, his voice thin on the wind. She grabbed the mule's reins and scrambled down, pulling the animal into the narrow, high-walled canyon. Thunder Pass. Ashki plunged in behind her, his breath tearing in his chest. They ran. The pass was a deep, winding cut, their only escape route to Fort Wingate. They rounded a sharp bend, the walls closing in, and stopped. Marshal Kincaid was there. He sat on his horse, flanked by 6 deputies, their shotguns leveled. They blocked the pass completely. "End of the line, tracker," Kincaid sneered, his badge gleaming dully in the yellow light. "We had word you would try this way. Nowhere left to run. They were in a box, a trap. "Behind us, Kincaid," one of the deputies shouted, looking back. Cole's 3 men appeared at the mouth of the pass, sealing the entrance. "Well, well," Kincaid smiled. "It seems Mr. Cole has done his job. Throw down your weapons." Ashki raised his Winchester, his face a mask of exhaustion and rage. The first shot did not come from Kincaid. It came from above. Ephraim Cole. He was on the rimrock, a ghost in the yellow dust, his rifle a long, dark line. The bullet screamed off the rock near Ashki's head, showering them with stone fragments. Kincaid's men panicked and opened fire. A volley of shotgun pellets hammered the rocks around them. They were caught in a crossfire. Ashki grabbed Eliza and threw her hard against the canyon wall, shielding her with his body. A bullet from Kincaid's pistol tore a long, red line through the sleeve of Ashki's good arm. He grunted, ignoring it. Eliza gasped, seeing the fresh blood. She grabbed the front of his shirt, trying to pull him down, to get him behind a small, pitiful outcrop of stone. "Stay close," she said, her voice a desperate, choked plea. He looked down at her. His eyes were not afraid. They were burning. The chaos of the ricochets, the dust, the screaming wind, all of it seemed to vanish. He wrapped his good arm around her, his grip like a steel band, and pulled her bodily against his chest, turning his back to the heaviest fire. "Ain't no bullet could drive me away," he swore, his voice a low growl against her hair. The crossfire was untenable. Pellets and lead spattered the rock all around them. They were going to be cut to pieces. "My cloak!" Ashki yelled over the din. He shrugged his heavy wool cloak from his shoulders. "And your satchel, the glass." Eliza understood. Her camera, her extra supplies. She ripped open her main satchel, ignoring the weaving comb box, and pulled out a large, heavy, blank glass plate, one she kept for emergencies. "Together," he commanded. They held them up, his thick wool cloak and her fragile, heavy plate of glass, a shield of desperation. A deputy fired his shotgun again. The blast hit them. The wool cloak absorbed the force, deadening the pellets, which fell harmlessly. The glass plate, however, was not as strong. It exploded. A starburst of shattered crystal flew through the air. For a moment, in the yellow, dusty light, the shards were a cloud of diamonds. Eliza stared as the light hit the fragments, breaking, refracting. The truth, she thought. 1,000 pieces of broken light, still cutting, still reflecting the sun. "Now," Ashki said. The smoke from the blast was thick. He grabbed her hand and pulled her, not to the front, not to the back, but toward the wall. "Here." It was a hole, a dark, narrow opening at the base of the cliff, no bigger than a coffin, a wind tunnel. He shoved her in, crawling behind her. The sound was a physical blow. The wind howled through the narrow passage, a deafening, subterranean roar. It was one of the breathing holes of the canyon. They crawled in the dark, the sound of gunfire suddenly muffled, replaced by the screaming of the earth. They were in for a full minute, crawling over smooth, worn stone. Ashki paused. Below them, back in the pass, they could hear Kincaid shouting, his voice faint. "Where did they go? Find them. They are in the rocks." Ashki put 2 fingers to his lips. He whistled. It was not a human sound. It was a high, thin, piercing scream, the cry of a hawk diving. It cut through the sound of the wind. He did it again. Below, the deputies' horses, tied loosely, heard the sound. They heard it coming from the rock itself, an unearthly scream. They panicked. They reared, pulling their reins free, and bolted, scattering back down the pass, taking precious ammunition and water with them. "That slows them," Ashki panted. They emerged from the tunnel, gasping, onto a narrow ledge 20 feet above the canyon floor. They were past Kincaid's blockade, but they were not safe. Ephraim Cole had anticipated their move. He had relocated on the rim. The rifle cracked again. and the bullet struck the stone just inches from Eliza's foot. He was zeroing in.
He can see us,
Eliza said, pressing herself flat.
I cannot see him,
Ashki said, his eyes scanning the rim.
The dust, the light. He needs to see us,
Eliza said, her mind racing. Her camera, her flash. She scrambled, digging into her chemical satchel. She pulled out the small, cloth bag of magnesium powder. Your hand, she commanded. Your good one. Ashki held it out, his palm up, confused. She poured a heavy, dangerous amount of the fine, silver powder into his hand. When I tell you, she said, throw it, up, into the wind. She waited, her eyes on the rim. She saw the glint, the rifle scope. Now, Ashki hurled the powder into the air. It hung for a moment, a silver cloud in the yellow, swirling dust. Eliza pulled the small Derringer pistol she kept strapped to her ankle. She did not aim. She fired it straight into the cloud of magnesium. The world went white, a brilliant, blinding woof of pure light. The canyon was illuminated by a miniature sun, burning for a single, intense second. Men screamed. Kincaid's men, their eyes turned to the flash, were instantly blind. High above, Ephraim Cole, staring through his rifle scope, took the full, amplified force of the blast. He cried out, staggering back from the rim, his vision completely gone. His next shot was wild, fired in blind panic, hitting the opposite canyon wall. Enough of this circus. The voice was not Kincaid's. It was clear, educated, and filled with a cold, absolute fury. Bartholomew Pike. He stepped out from behind Kincaid and his blinded men. He was immaculate, his dark suit somehow untouched by the dust, and he was not alone. He was holding a rope. At the other end, her hands bound, her face bruised but defiant, was Nali Udda. This game is over, Pike said. He signaled. Two of his own private guards, not Kincaid's men, dragged Nali Ada up a steep, narrow game trail to a high, exposed ledge. They held her there, a perfect, vulnerable target. Ashki Nez, Eliza Hart, Pike called, his voice cutting through the wind. The situation is simple. You will give me the plate, the real one, and the map, or my men will throw her off that ledge. He has her, Ashki whispered, his voice broken. He raised his rifle. Ah, Pike admonished. Even you are not that fast. Tracker, and I know you only have one good arm. He stepped forward into the howling wind. This is a waste of my time. My men are building a depot. This pass, this entire valley. It sits on the largest, purest aquifer in the territory. My railroad, my mines, they will own the only water for 100 miles. I will not be stopped by you. He had said it. The truth, the motive, the entire confession. You are a monster, Eliza breathed. I am a businessman, my dear, now. The plate. The wind was a living thing now, a solid wall of sand. The storm had hit. Visibility dropped to 10, maybe 15 feet. It was a screaming, yellow chaos. Pike, Eliza yelled, her voice thin against the roar. You want it! She ripped open the heavy weaving comb box. She pulled out the real plate, the negative, the image of his men, setting the timer. Here it is, she screamed into the storm. But you cannot have it. Pike stopped. He squinted, trying to see her through the maelstrom. Girl, do not be a fool. Give it to me. I will break it, she shrieked. I will drop it right now. You will have your water, but you will be a murderer. Everyone in Santa Fe will know it. The proof will be dust, but the story will be out all this for nothing. Pike froze. Kincaid, blinded, was useless. Pike's men, squinting, could barely see. He needed the plate. He needed to destroy it himself. He could not risk her destroying it. Hold your fire, he roared to his men. Do not shoot her. It was the pause, the hesitation, Ushki was gone. He had vanished into the yellow storm. Pike was looking at Eliza. Kincaid was wiping his eyes. Only one man was still hunting. Ephraim Cole. His vision was returning, spots swimming in his eyes. He saw the movement. Ushki, moving up the rock face, his wounds forgotten, his body fueled by pure adrenaline, climbing like a spider toward the ledge where Nali Ada was held. Cole moved to intercept. Ushki reached the ledge. He drove his knife into the chest of the first guard. The man fell without a sound. The second guard turned, raising his rifle. Ushki cut the ropes on Nali's hands. "Go!" he commanded, shoving her toward the fissure he had just climbed. He turned. Ephraim Cole was standing there. The two men met, not with rifles. There was no time, no space. It was hand to hand, on a ledge barely wide enough for a man's boot, in the middle of a blinding sandstorm. It was brutal. Cole was stronger, a brawler, but Ushki was faster, desperate. He fought with his good arm, his knife, his feet. He slammed Cole against the rock face. Cole countered, driving a heavy fist into Ushki's wounded shoulder. Ushki roared, a sound of pure agony. But he used the pain. He drove his weight forward, tripping Cole on the loose, sandy rock. Cole stumbled. His heel found no purchase. The edge of the cliff was not where he thought it was. He was falling. He tried to grab the rock, his gloved hand sliding on the sandstone. He was going over. Ushki reacted. It was pure, raw instinct. He dropped his knife. He lunged. He caught Cole's wrist. There was a single, terrible, quiet second. The storm howled around them. The two men were locked, arm to arm. Ushki, his feet braced, his muscles screaming, holding his enemy, Cole, dangling over the abyss. Cole looked up. He saw Ushki's face, strained with effort. He saw the man he had hunted, the savage, the man whose amulet he had destroyed, straining to save his life. A look of profound, terrible disgust crossed Ephraim Cole's face. It was not fear. It was pride. He would not be saved. He would not owe his life to this man. He looked Ushki in the eye, and he let go. He did not scream. He simply relaxed his hand, twisting it, pulling it free from Ushki's desperate grip. He fell. He vanished into the yellow, screaming void. Ushki was left on the ledge, his arm outstretched, gasping for air, alone in the storm. The canyon held its breath. The yellow howl of the wind was the only sound. Ushki stood on the ledge, his arm outstretched, the feeling of Ephraim Cole's hand slipping from his grasp a cold spot on his skin. He was gasping, his wounded shoulder and arm screaming, his chest aching where the amulet had exploded. Below, through the screaming grit, Marshal Kincaid was recovering his vision. He wiped his streaming eyes, his face a mask of rage. He saw Pike, trapped. He saw Eliza, standing alone, holding the weaving comb box. She was the center of it all, the witness. He was ruined. He knew it. Pike would blame him. Cole was gone. He had nothing left but the animal instinct of a cornered man. He raised his pistol. His hand was shaking, but his aim was steady. He did not aim at Ushki, who was too high. He did not aim at Eliza's heart. He aimed at the box. "The evidence!" he screamed, his voice a raw, broken sound. "You want it, hell can have it!" He fired. Ushki saw the move. "Eliza!" he roared. She did not duck. She did not try to run. In that fraction of a second, her choice was absolute. She turned her body, ripping the true plate from the box, holding it flat against her chest with both hands. She turned sideways, making herself a smaller target, shielding the glass with her own flesh and bone. She braced for the impact. The bullet struck. She cried out, a high, thin sound, as the force threw her back against the canyon wall. She slid to the ground, stunned. She felt no pain. She looked down. The bullet had not hit her. It had struck the edge of the glass plate. It was not shattered. It was cracked. A long, spidering web of fractures radiated from the top corner. A lead-colored star where the bullet had hit. The image was broken, fractured into a dozen pieces, but it was still held together by the emulsion. The faces of Pike's men, the timer, they were all still visible. The truth was cracked, but it had not been destroyed. A new sound entered the storm. It was not the wind. It was not gunfire. It was a bell, a deep, slow clang, clang, clang. It was the bell from Sister May's mission, ringing with a slow, mournful urgency. Through the yellow wall of the sandstorm, at the mouth of the pass Kincaid had thought was secure, figures emerged. They were not deputies. They were not soldiers. They were the town. Dozens of them, the Mexican laborers, their faces hard, carrying pickaxes and shovels. The Irish track layers, their eyes grim. The black freemen from the shanties. They marched forward, a silent, angry army. At their head walked Sister May. Her gray habit was whipped by the wind, but she moved like a general. "We heard the shots." Her voice cut through the wind, clear and strong. "We heard the lies." Pike, who had been frozen in horror, watching Kincaid, spun around. "Get back," he bellowed. "Kincaid, stop them. This is a riot." But Kincaid was trapped. He looked at the crowd. He looked at his deputies, who were nervously lowering their weapons, hopelessly outnumbered. "Mr. Pike," a new voice called out. A man stepped from behind Sister May. It was Whitcomb, the engineer. He was pale, terrified, but resolute. He held a heavy, rolled oilcloth tube in his hand. "I will not be a part of this," Whitcomb shouted, his voice shaking. "I have the real schematics, the technical maps. They prove the diversion pipe leads to your silver mine. They prove the aquifer is being illegally tapped." "And I have this," another man yelled, pushing through the crowd. It was Dr. Holland. He was sober, his eyes blazing. He held up the small tin bowl from his surgery. "This is the fragment I cut from Ashki-Nez lead from a rifle. Not a rock. I examined the warehouse site. Pike, the blast came from inside. It was a setup. You set your own fire." The crowd surged forward, a low animal growl rising from their throats. Bartholomew Pike saw it. The end. His men were blinded. Kincaid was useless. Cole was gone. The town, his town, was against him. He was a businessman. He cut his losses. He turned, silent, and sprinted for his horse, which was still tied to a rock near the canyon wall. He would ride. He would get to the telegraph at the next station. He would report an insurrection, bring in the army. This was not over. He fumbled with the reins. He got his foot in the stirrup. A leather latigo strap, thin and dark, snaked through the air. It wrapped twice, neat and perfect, around Pike's ankle. Pike was halfway into the saddle when the strap went taut. He was ripped backward, pulled from the horse, and crashed to the hard, rocky ground. The air was knocked from his lungs in a painful gasp. He looked up. Ashki-Nez was standing over him. He had descended from the ledge, his face a grim, bleeding mask. He held the end of the latigo in his one good hand. "This is assault," Pike choked, his face turning purple. "Kincaid, arrest this savage." Ashki did not speak. He walked toward Pike, pulling the strap. He ignored Pike's struggles. He looped the leather around the man's wrists, with a series of fast, efficient movements. He began to tie. It was not a deputy's knot. It was a Navajo tie, a hobble, a knot designed for a wild animal that only grows tighter with every pull. Pike was bound, helpless. "This is our law," Ashki said, his voice quiet, for Pike alone. "When a predator steals the sheep, you tie him. You do not let him run." The wind, as if sensing the moment, began to die. The thick, yellow dust started to settle. The canyon was a natural amphitheater, and it was full. Eliza Hart got to her feet. Her hands were shaking. She held the cracked, heavy glass plate, She stepped into the center of the clearing.
"This is the truth,"
she cried, her voice raw. "Mr. Pike wants you to thirst. He wants you to blame the Navajo for the fire for the water." She moved, retrieving her satchel. She pulled out the other plates, the ones she had taken by moonlight. She held them up, one by one. "This," she held up the image of the Navajo building the dam, "is not destruction. This is protection. They were trying to save their own water." She held up the photo of the canyon mouth, the one she took as the bullet struck. "This is the war he brought to them." Finally, she held up the cracked plate. "And this is his lie. His own men setting the timer. I saw them. The camera saw them." She looked at Whitcomb, who nodded, and then at Dr. Holland. "He set the fire to justify stealing this valley. He cut off your water to force you to help him. He lied to all of us." The crowd surged, their anger palpable. "Thief!" a woman screamed. "Liar!" Marshal Kincaid saw his world ending. He was tied to Pike, ruined. He looked around, desperate, for a target. His eyes landed on Whitcomb, the engineer, the witness. "You!" Kincaid roared, pulling a second, smaller pistol from his boot. "You traitor!" He leveled the pistol at Whitcomb's chest. No, it was Toby, the boy, freed by Nalieda in the chaos of the rockfall, had grabbed a fallen deputy's heavy oil lantern. He threw it, with all his small, desperate strength. The lantern arced through the air. It struck Kincaid's arm just as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wild, harmlessly into the stone wall of the canyon. Before Kincaid could recover, Sister May moved. She dropped her calm. She lunged, grabbing Kincaid's gun hand with both of hers. She slammed his wrist against the canyon wall, a crack of bone. The pistol clattered to the ground. She did not stop. She kicked the pistol away, seized Kincaid by his collar, and slammed him back against the rock, pressing her body against his. "It is over, Marshal," she panted, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "It is over!" A deep, profound silence fell over the canyon. The town, the Navajo, the deputies, all of them stood, watching. Eliza Hart stepped forward. She was covered in blood, Ashki's blood and rock dust. She pulled her father's journal from her satchel. She opened it to the last page. Her voice, trembling but clear, read his words into the quiet. He wrote, "If you must choose, choose the weak. Their truth is the one that gets buried." She looked at the crowd, at the laborers, at Ashki. He wrote that the freedom to live must always come before the freedom to go. We all just want to live. Mr. Pike tried to take that from all of us. Ashki moved to stand beside her, his grandmother on his other side. He looked at the laborers, at Sister May, at the defeated deputies. He spoke. His English was slow, measured, heavy with the pain of his wounds. "We did not burn the warehouse," he said. "We did not poison the water." He touched the ground with his foot. "This is our home. We do not ask for privilege. We do not ask for special favor." He looked at Pike, tied and bleeding on the ground. "We only ask for water, and for home. We ask for what is ours. He will have it." The voice was new. A man, dressed in a clean dark suit and a bowler hat, stepped out from behind Sister May. He looked utterly out of place. "I am Representative Vale, from the District Court at Fort Wingate," the man said, his voice carrying the calm authority of law. "Sister May rode all night to fetch me. She said there was a dispute over water rights." He surveyed the scene. He saw Bartholomew Pike, the most powerful man in the territory, tied on the ground. He saw the county marshal, held at bay by a nun. He saw the Navajo warriors, bleeding. He saw the cracked photographic plate in Eliza's hand. He saw the technical maps in Whitcomb's. "Good Lord," he murmured. He walked over and picked up the pistol Kincaid had dropped. He looked at the cracked plate. "May I?" Eliza handed it to him. He studied it. "It is undeniable. He took a deep breath. Mr. Bartholomew Pike, Marshal Kincaid, you are hereby under arrest by the authority of the Arizona Territorial Court on charges of conspiracy, arson, attempted murder, and inciting a riot. He looked at Sister May. Ma'am, he unpinned a small silver badge from his own vest. I am deputizing you. Hold these men. The army will be here by morning to escort them to Fort Wingate. He turned to Whitcomb. Sir, I will require those maps as evidence. He looked at Ashki. And you, sir, your people, and this valley are, by my authority, under the direct protection of the court, the relocation order is void. As he spoke the words, the wind died completely. The air, thick with yellow dust, grew still. A single, fat drop of water struck the rock at Eliza's feet. It left a dark, round mark. A low, deep rumble of thunder rolled through the pass. It was not the sound of guns. And then the rain began to fall. It was not a deluge. It was a soft, steady, impossible rain. It fell on the parched ground, on the laborers, on the Navajo. It washed the dust from the air, the blood from the rocks, the sweat and fear from their faces. The sky, which had been a wall of yellow, was now a soft, cleansing gray. The earth itself was bearing witness. The army stayed for a week. They were quiet, professional men who listened to Representative Vail and did not bother the town. Their first act, under Vail's authority, was to escort a wagon carrying a bound Bartholomew Pike and a spluttering, broken Marshal Kincaid to the jail at Fort Wingate. Their second act was to dismantle the illegal dam. It was not the soldiers who did the work, but the laborers from the town. Men who had been starved by Pike's blockade now swung their pickaxes against his legacy. Whitcomb, the engineer, directed the demolition, his voice no longer shaking, but firm with the authority of physics. They worked for 2 days, and when the last timber was hauled away, the water, hesitant at first, began to reclaim its old path. It trickled past the broken dam, a dark, muddy thread. It found the old, dry bed of Bitter Spring. Eliza Hart and Ashki Nez stood on the ridge, watching. It took hours. The water crept, sank into the thirsty earth, and then, finally, began to pool. By evening, the basin at Bitter Spring, which had been a dry, cracked bowl of mud, was a shallow mirror reflecting the purple sky. The next morning, the clan of Ashki Nez went to the spring. Eliza followed, but she kept her distance. She brought her camera, but she did not set it up. She watched from the rocks as Nali Ada, her face serene, knelt by the new water. The clan, their captured men returned, gathered in a silent circle. Nali Ada took a small pouch from her belt, filled with sacred yellow corn pollen. She took a pinch, touched it to her tongue, and whispered a prayer, her words lost in the sound of the wind. She scattered the pollen onto the surface of the water, a golden blessing. Ashki, his arm bound in a clean white sling provided by Dr. Holland, did the same. It was a ceremony of thanks. It was quiet, simple, and profound. Eliza lowered her head. She did not take the picture. She finally understood what Ashki had told her on that first day. The land was the ceremony. She had come to document the West, but she had become part of its story. She turned and walked away, leaving them their privacy. 2 weeks later, Eliza was in Santa Fe. The editor of the Santa Fe New Mexican stared at the prints laid out on his desk. He was a thin man with ink stains on his collar, and he had seen everything, but he had never seen this. Water, Work, and Witness. He read the title she had written on the portfolio. He looked at the images, the Navajo men straining in the moonlight to build their dam, the ghostly light of the canyon mouth, framed by the dark saving rock, the shot of Dr. Holland's tin bowl, holding the ragged piece of lead, and the centerpiece, the cracked plate. He had printed it exactly as it was. The spiderweb of fractures, the mark of Kincaid's bullet, was part of the image. the faces of Pike's men, distorted but undeniable, stared out from the broken glass. "This, Miss Hart," the editor said, tapping the cracked plate, "is the most honest photograph I have ever seen. It shows the story and the cost of getting it." The story ran on the front page for 3 days. It was a sensation. It named Bartholomew Pike. It detailed the testimony of Whitcomb and Holland. It described the illegal diversion, the Dry Mesa Water War. They called it. By the time Eliza returned to Dry Mesa, she was carrying a heavy bank draft. The newspaper had paid her handsomely. She did not keep the money. She walked to the small adobe mission. "Sister May," Eliza said, placing the envelope on the table, "this is for the town." Sister May looked at the amount, and her eyes widened. "It is not mine," Eliza insisted. "It belongs to the land. I want you to start a fund, a water fund, for Dry Mesa, for everyone." The idea, born in the mission, grew. Representative Vale, hearing of it, formalized it in the court. The district court seized Pike's local assets, the silver mine, the warehouse pending the trial, the valley, and the aquifer beneath it was placed in a public trust. The Dry Mesa Water Cooperative was born. It was a piece of paper, but it was a revolution. The board was made of 5 people, 1 Navajo elder, 1 representative for the railroad laborers, 1 farmer from the downstream claims, Sister May, and 1 technical advisor. Engineer Whitcomb accepted the post of advisor. He was a new man. His work, once a tool of theft, was now the blueprint for survival. He designed a new system of fair distribution, ensuring the aquifer was never depleted, the springs were never starved, and the town and the railroad had exactly what they needed, and no more. Dr. Holland was appointed, not as a board member, but as the county's first public health supervisor. His job was to test the water, to ensure its purity. He was seen less and less in the saloon, and more at the springs, his hands holding a test vial, perfectly steady. Life was returning. Eliza found Ashki near the ruins of their temporary camp. The army, before leaving, had burned the hogans Kincaid's men had ransacked. Ashki was standing with his men, looking at the ashes. His arm was healing, the sling gone, though he still moved stiffly. "We will rebuild," he said. He had been quiet since his return. His grief for the amulet his brother had given him, a silent, heavy thing. They chose a new spot, a place sheltered by the red rocks, and began to cut timbers for a new, large hogan. The next day, as they worked, a wagon appeared. It was the man Eliza had seen arguing at the water barrel, the leader of the Mexican laborers. He and 2 other men sat in the wagon. It was piled high with cured piñon logs. The laborer looked at Ashki. He did not speak. He just jerked his chin toward the logs. "For the dam," he said in rough English. Ashki nodded. "For the home," he replied. The men unloaded the wood. They were joined, an hour later, by 2 of the Irish track layers, who brought sacks of earth and lime. The town, which had been built on a foundation of suspicion and greed, was learning, slowly, how to live together. Eliza watched them work. She was living at Sister May's mission, sleeping in a small, clean room. She was developing her new plates, documenting the rebuilding. She was happy. A letter arrived on the weekly stage. It was thick, heavy, with an embossed letterhead from a New York newspaper. She opened it. The editor in Santa Fe had sent her photographs east. This was a job offer, a position as a traveling correspondent. It was a salary larger than she had ever imagined. It was fame. It was access. It was everything her father had wanted for his own career. She held the letter, her hands trembling. This was a road out, a road to a different life, a world of theaters and restaurants and respect. She walked through Dry Mesa, the letter in her pocket. The town was still dusty, still raw, but it was no longer Pike's town. It was their town. She saw Ashki, teaching a group of boys, Toby among them, how to read the tracks of a lizard in the dust. He looked up as she approached. He saw the letter in her hand, the look on her face. He knew. He had been struggling. He had watched her for weeks. He had felt the way his heart moved when she was near, a slow, deep pull like the returning water. He had seen the way she watched him, but he would not speak. He would not bind her. He had seen what happened when men tried to own things: the water, the land, the truth. A person's path was their own. "You have news," he said. It was a statement.
"From the east," she said, her voice quiet. "A job, a good one."
He nodded, his face calm, revealing nothing. "You have earned it. You brought the truth out. Your road is clear." He turned back to the boys, leaving the choice entirely, painfully, in her hands. That night, Eliza sat by the fire at the new, half-finished hogan. The walls were up, the roof not yet complete. Nali Ada sat across from her, her hands, as always, busy, this time with a needle, mending a blanket. "You are a bird on a wire," Nali Ada said, not looking up. "Your wings are open, but your feet are heavy." Eliza looked at the older woman. "They have offered me a life my father dreamed of, away from here. And you are afraid to take it?" "No," Eliza said, surprising herself. "I am afraid to leave." Nali Ada smiled, a small, knowing expression. "When I was a girl, my grandmother told me to keep a person is not to trap them. To keep a person is to keep a promise. A man who builds a cage keeps nothing." She looked at Ashki, who was standing at the edge of the firelight, his back to them, watching the stars. "A man who builds a home, he keeps everything." She reached beside her and picked up a familiar object, the long, carved wooden box, the weaving comb. "This held the plate," Eliza whispered. "It did," Nali Ada said. "It held the shadow, but its true purpose is to make things, to take the wool, the thread, and bind it together, to make a blanket, to make a home." She held the box out to Eliza. "I cannot take this." "It is not a gift," Nali Ada said. "It is a tool. It is time for you to weave your home, Eliza Hart, wherever that home may be." Eliza looked at the box. She looked at Ashki, his strong, silent back. She looked at the red earth, glowing in the firelight. She took the box. The next day, Eliza sat in her small room at the mission. She took out a fresh piece of paper and a pen. To the editor, she wrote, "I am deeply honored by your offer. However, my work is not yet finished here." She sealed the envelope before she sent it. She took one last photograph. She found Ashki at the spring, checking the new, simple markers Whitcomb had helped him install to measure the water level. She held her camera. He looked at her. "One photograph," she said, "not for the newspaper, for me." He did not object. She did not take a picture of his face. She knelt by the water. She placed her hand, pale and stained with chemicals, on the wet red earth by the spring. He watched her for a moment. Then, slowly, he knelt beside her. He placed his own hand, calloused and brown, next to hers. 2 hands, side by side, by the water they had saved. She took the picture. She enclosed a print in the envelope with her polite refusal. She would stay. She would stay for the rainy season. She would see what this new, fragile world would become. Life settled into a new rhythm. Examples of rules were set. Eliza, now living in a small, repaired cabin near the mission, learned the Navajo calendar of ceremonies. She learned when the camera must be put away, when the land must be left in peace. In return, she taught 3 days a week. In the shade of the mission wall, she held a school. Toby was her first student, Nali Ada her second. The old woman wanted to learn to write her name. Soon, the Navajo children came, and then the children of the laborers. They learned to read. They learned to write. And she taught them how to use her smaller camera. She was giving them the tools to tell their own stories. Ashki, his wounds finally healed, his spirit mending. also became a teacher. He took the young men the sons of the Irish and Mexican laborers, even the son of a shamed deputy who had stayed into the canyons. He taught them not how to fight, but how to see, how to track, how to find water, how to listen to the land, not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a home to be understood. It was a slow, fragile peace, built on shared hardship and a new, desperate respect. The town of Dry Mesa was learning, finally, to drink from the same spring. The trial of Bartholomew Pike and Marshall Kincaid in Fort Wingate lasted 6 days. It was not just 2 men on trial, but an entire way of life. The courtroom was packed. Men from Dry Mesa laborers, miners, and farmers stood shoulder to shoulder with Oshkey's clan, filling the benches. Pike's lawyers, sent from back east, were slick and loud. They painted Eliza as a hysterical, fame-seeking girl. They painted Oshkey as a violent savage, resisting progress. They painted Pike as a visionary, a builder of the nation. But they could not argue with the evidence. First, Engineer Whitcomb took the stand. He presented his technical schematics. He explained, in the clear, precise language of mathematics, how the diversion dam was built not for the railroad, but for the silver mine. He proved, with flow rates and capacity charts, that Pike's plan would have turned the entire valley into a desert within 2 years. Then, Dr. Holland testified. He presented the lead fragment he had cut from Oshkey's arm. He described, in the cold, angry terms of medicine, the wounds of the men shot in the moonlight. He presented his findings from the warehouse, proving the explosion was set with accelerants from inside the structure. Finally, Eliza Hart was called. She did not speak of her fear, or of the chase. She simply presented the photographs. She placed the print of the men setting the timer, the one made from the cracked plate, before the jury. "This is the lie," she said, her voice quiet but carrying in the silent room. Then she placed the prints from that night at the spring, the images of the Navajo men, their muscles straining in the moonlight, working to divert the water. "And this," she said, "is the truth." The jury was out for less than 1 hour. Bartholomew Pike was found guilty of conspiracy, arson, and the attempted murder of Marshall Kincaid's deputies. Kincaid himself was found guilty of conspiracy, dereliction of duty, and attempted murder. The sentences were severe. The railroad company, fearing a territory-wide scandal that would halt their federal funding, publicly disavowed both men. Pike's assets in the territory were seized, placed in a trust to be paid as compensation to the laborers he had starved, and the Navajo clan whose lands he had tried to steal. The railroad, in a public statement of goodwill, agreed to abide by Whitcomb's original, safer proposal. The tracks would be rerouted 5 miles south, leaving the valley and its aquifer completely untouched. Dry Mesa had won. Eliza did not stay for the celebrations. She returned to the valley with Oshkey and Nali Ada, the portfolio of photographs, the physical evidence. She left with Representative Vale. They were entered into the official record of the court. They were not her personal trophies. They were the town's public memory, a permanent, legal shield. The rainy season passed. The valley, fed by the restored spring, turned a shade of soft, improbable green. The new life, fragile as it was, began to organize itself. The mission became the center, Sister May. Using the first of the compensation funds, established what she called the Photo and Water Station. It was a strange name, but a practical one. It had 2 halves. Oshkey was in charge of the water. He taught the ranchers and laborers the Navajo methods of conservation, how to read the land, how to build small, smart check dams to slow erosion. He became the valley's protector. Eliza was in charge of the photos. She taught literacy to anyone who would come. She taught Toby, now her official apprentice, how to mix chemicals, how to frame a shot. She was giving the people the tools to record their own history, to ensure no one could ever lie about them again. The new, larger Hogan of Oshkey's clan was finished. It was warm, the walls thick with new mud, the roof solid against the wind. One evening, as the first cold wind of winter blew down from the mesas, Eliza sat by the central fire with Nali Ada and Oshkey. The silence was comfortable, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the sound of Ashki working. He was carving a small piece of juniper wood, the same wood his brother's amulet had been made from. His knife moved with a slow, careful grace. Eliza watched him. She had been repairing her large camera. The box was mended, the bellows were patched, but the lens, the one from the plate Kincaid had shot, was still cracked. She had a new, clean glass plate in her satchel, shipped from Santa Fe. She had not installed it. She ran her finger over the fine, web-like fracture. She would keep it. The crack was a lesson. It was a reminder that the truth was not always clean, not always perfect. The crack did not stop the light. It only bent it, breaking it into new, unexpected colors. It showed the world not as it was, but as it had been earned. Ashki finished his carving. He looked at Eliza, and then at his grandmother. Nali, Ada nodded once, a small, private signal. He reached across the fire and held out his hand. He was not holding the wood. He was holding a piece of polished turquoise, strung on a simple leather thong. Eliza looked closer. He had carved the stone itself. It was a perfect, small, arching rainbow, the kind that appears low on the horizon after a violent thunderstorm. "I cannot wear the other," he said, his voice low, his fingers touching the bare skin of his chest where the amulet had been. It belonged to the past. It belonged to the long walk. He held the new amulet out to her. "This," he said, "belongs to the rain." Eliza looked at Nali Ada, who was watching them, her eyes bright with a deep, quiet wisdom. Eliza reached out and took it. Her fingers brushed his palm. It was the first time they had touched, truly since the fight. His hand was rough, warm, and strong. It did not tremble, and neither did hers. "Ashki," she whispered, "this is for you. It is your protection." "No," he said, his gaze holding hers. "It is my promise." He closed her hand around the stone. "The bullet that broke my brother's wood. It could not drive me away. No bullet," he said, his voice firm, "could ever drive me from this home." Eliza felt her heart swell, a slow, painful, wonderful pressure. She understood. He was not giving her a gift. He was giving her his vow. She looked at Nali Ada, and then back to him. Her voice was clear as the mission bell. "I will keep you, Ashki Nez," she said. It was not a declaration of passion. It was a statement of fact. He closed his good hand over hers, the stone warm between their palms. "I will keep you, Eliza Hart," he replied. And Nali Ada, her face lit by the warm, smoky fire, smiled. The next spring, the town came together. Navajo, Mexican, Irish, American, they gathered at the head of the main street, by the town pump, which now ran clear and full for all. They erected a monument. It was not a statue of a soldier or a politician. It was a simple, three-sided column of red rock hauled from Thunder Pass. On it, Whitcomb and Eliza had carved a single sentence, translated by Nali Ada and the head of the labor camp. On the first side, in English, water belongs to those who care for it. On the second, in Spanish, el agua pertenece a quienes la cuidan. On the third, in the characters of the Dine language, to e ina a te. It was their shared constitution, their first true law. That night, Eliza sat in her small cabin. The air was warm. Outside, she could hear the distant, lonely call of a coyote and the sound of the wind moving through the yucca. The sounds no longer made her afraid. They were the sounds of her home. She opened her father's journal, the one she had not touched in months. She turned to the last, faded page, to the words that had driven her for so long. "If you must choose, choose the weak. Their truth is the one that gets buried." She picked up her pen. She dipped it in the ink, and below his words, she added her own. "I am finished reading your story. Father, she wrote, and I have finally begun to write mine." She looked at the last, blank lines on the page. She remembered his final wish, his final command. I have written the rest with real people, real land. She smiled, a slow, real smile.
Yes,
She whispered to the empty room.
I did.
You wrote the rest with real people, real land. She closed the book. The sun rose early, as it always did in the high desert. The light, sharp and clean, poured through the open window of her cabin. It struck the repaired camera, which she kept on her desk. It passed through the cracked lens. The fracture, the flaw, the scar of their fight, caught the light. It broke the pure, white beam. A small, brilliant rainbow of color, red and blue and green and gold, was cast onto the cabin floor. It moved as the sun climbed, a streak of imperfect, beautiful light, touching the red earth, promising a future that was not perfect, but was, at last, true. Thank you for listening to this story. Let us know where you are listening from in the comments below, so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to my channel, Wild West Tales. Like this video, and give us your extra support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.